channels. Britain is watching.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 24th of June. Today, well, it's Happy Armed Forces Day. Celebrations take place around the UK, paying tribute to the men and women serving our country.
Yeah, the very best of British they are too. And banks have pledged more protection for homeowners as mortgage rates soar after the Bank of England increased interest rates to 5%. But is it enough?
And as the recovery operations for the Titan submersible begin to wind down, Canadian officials do confirm that they're going to conduct a safety investigation into that fatal implosion of the deep-sea vessel.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
It's a hot and humid weekend to come for many of us. Join me later for the full GBNews weather forecast.
So a very good morning. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Dalby. It's an absolute honour and a privilege to be with you here. And the legend, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.
This is Breakfast on GB News.
Now, frankly, it's lovely to have something positive to celebrate today.
It is. Fantastic.
And we can, because Cornwall is preparing to host the national celebrations for Armed Forces Day for the very first time.
Yeah, a series of events will be held across the country, with the main displays centred around Falmouth.
It sounds brilliant, because over 1,000 service personnel and bands will parade through the town centre in the largest and longest military parade ever held in the UK.
And onlookers will then be treated to fly past again from the Red Arrows, a parachute drop by the RAF and a music concert in the evening.
Oh, do you know, it sounds brilliant.
Sounds amazing.
I love that sort of day.
Wish I was there.
And we got the weather for it as well, haven't we? Our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, looks ahead to what's going to be a day of military might and celebration.
They say the people of Cornwall will never have seen anything like this. Marching bands, military inspections, flypasts, the might of the British Armed Forces on full display. 100,000 people are expected to descend on Falmouth today. The aim? To show support for the men and women who make up the armed forces, from currently serving troops to service families, veterans and cadets. There's a military parade at 11 o'clock. Over 1,000 service personnel, marching bands galore. Then in the afternoon, all eyes turn to the sky. Red Arrows, Navy Merlin helicopters, Spitfires, and wrapping up with a prom-style concert in the evening. It's the 15th Armed Forces Day. Cornwall Council says it's honoured to have won the bid to host this year's festivities. It's costing Cornish taxpayers £350,000, some saying it's inappropriate given the cost of living crisis, biting particularly hard in the Duchy. But it's expected to bring in around £7 million in revenue. Organisers say the event will be a chance to take photos, to make memories, and above all, to celebrate peace. A peace that's been hard fought for, hard won. A peace that's lasted 80 years. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, that certainly does stir the cockles, doesn't it? Well, joining us this morning is former Army Officer Patrick Benham Crosswell. Good morning to you, sir. Can we start with just explaining to us just why and how Armed Forces Day is so important?
Well, it was set up in 2006 by Gordon Brown to be a celebration and if you like, a celebration of serving and living veterans rather than perhaps Remembrance Day, which of course remembers the fallen veterans. As the armed forces have got smaller and the Cold War ran down, it's been very difficult for many servicemen to actually engage with the public when they do what they do. Necessarily, people like submarine crews are very removed from the public gaze, and events like this give opportunities for the public to engage with the people who are devoting their lives to protecting them.
Yeah, I mean, our reporter there made the point that it's celebrating many decades of peace. But of course, at the same time, we have to remember that not all countries are at peace at the moment. We think, of course, of our friends in Ukraine. And we need to say thank you as well and acknowledge the work being done by the armed forces, including ours, to keep as much peace as possible out there. And we've got many forces out there at the moment on exercises as much as anything else, haven't we?
Yes, I mean, it hasn't been a universally peaceful 8 decades. I seem to remember there was some trouble in Northern Ireland and a few conflagrations in the Gulf that people were ready to go and act in this nation's interest to, to restore it. But yes, peace isn't something that just happens. Peace happens because people work very hard, ideally in the background, to make sure that peace is the best option for those who perhaps are a more violent disposition.
And how important are events like today for making sure that conscription rates stay up and people have an active interest in joining the armed forces, being part of the future?
I think they're vital. I mean, it's a personal opinion, but I mean, I think the armed forces have, for reasons of economy, probably cut back too far from engaging with the public. There's many reasons for that, but when I was serving, if you were based in England, if the local village phoned up and said, can you bring a couple of tanks along, then we'd bring a couple of tanks along. That facility doesn't exist now, and so yes, it's increasingly vital.
I mean, a lot of people think, yes, today is going to be a wonderful day, and it will be a reminder to us all of the people we should thank for helping keep the peace and fighting for it. But it's very important too, as Martin was saying, for conscription. But do we do enough, do you think, for the rest of the year? You're always struck when you go to America that when the minute an American, somebody at an airport or whatever, they see that somebody is a veteran or is wearing uniform, they always say, and thanks for your service, thanks for what you do. Do we do enough of that? Are we emotional enough about our armed forces?
Yes, I mean, there's always the British stiff upper lip. I think a natural reserve. I mean, I'd make the broader point that, usually whenever things go wrong, be it floods or the, blockages on the Channel Tunnel, it's quite often the armed forces that turn up to fix it first. And I think quietly, most people in the United Kingdom are aware that when stuff gets bad or whatever, there's an organisation with a command structure that can come and help sort it out very quickly. Within the UK, of course, because of the Ulster troubles, there was a long history, now diminishing in the armed forces, of actually never wearing uniform in public and being very discreet about what you do. And it may be that as peace goes forward and with the impact of things like Help for Heroes, when that stuff, people are more open about what they do for a job.
And Patrick, can I ask you about there's been word of changing the age of first sign-up, from moving from 16 to 18, but when we covered that on GB News a couple of weeks ago, we were contacted by loads of servicemen and servicewomen who were very, very strongly in favour of being able to join up as a 16-year-old, the making of the man, the making of a woman. A lot of people that don't want to go to sixth form or have to wait until 18. How important do you think it is to keep the age of 16 for people to be allowed into the armed forces?
Without doubt, what used to be called the Junior Leaders Programme, the 16-year-olds signing up, go on to become disproportionately good soldiers and disproportionately high proportion and get promoted early. If they want to do it, and they've taken suitable advice and they're looked after suitably, then it seems to me to be eminently sensible for everyone. You know, the debate about at what age are you an adult can disappear into, you know, the far. Sorry, I'm wittering. The debate about at what age you become adult is complex or whatever. But if a 16-year-old wants to go off and join the armed forces in a safe way for them and in a way to the benefit of the country, you know, what's not to like?
Yeah, absolutely. What are you going to be doing today? Will you be marking the day in any way today, or just watching it on the telly like the rest of us?
Sadly, duty comes first, and I've got a bit of work to do, so I'm taking a trip to Leicestershire and back.
Oh, sorry about that. Anyway, it's great to talk to you.
I'll be looking out of the window for the red arrows flying past.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we all will. Thank you so much for joining us and getting up so early for us too. Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to a second fly past in 2 weekends.
I know, it's lovely, isn't it? I love a red arrows fly past.
Yeah, and all the World War II stuff. I mean, the noise of those planes when they go past.
Oh,
it just
wonderful.
absolutely stirs the soul.
Is there anybody watching right now who joined up at 16?
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from you. I think your point is right. If not everybody is cut out for sixth form, for instance, or for anything else. And I've met so many people who joined up at 16 and are very grateful they did. And you can have a long career in the army or whatever, and you can learn trades. I think it's great. I think it's good training. You know, I'm a strong believer in national service, of some sort anyway. Well, maybe not the military is for everybody, but it does not teach you things.
Discipline, tidiness, manners, teamwork, respect for your elders.
Amazing.
Things sadly missing from a lot of today's society. OK.
So what are you doing on Armed Forces Day, and what do you think of it? And if you've ever been in the forces, what was your experience? And particularly, we'd love to hear from you if you joined up when you were very young.
Superb. OK, well, let's bring it up to date with what else is going on today. The head of Russia's mercenary group has accused the country's military of destroying his fighters and has vowed to stop the evil of Russia's military dictatorship. Yevgeny Prigozhin, leader of Wagner, claims the military leadership caused the deaths of 2,000 of his fighters. The Defence Ministry denies those allegations.
And the First Minister of Scotland says independence for the region could bring a transformational change. Speaking in Dundee later, Humza Yousaf will tell the SNP leaving the UK would give Scotland more power to build a better country. He's also going to tell the convention the Westminster economic model is causing misery to Scotland.
And the King is encouraging people to grow fruits and vegetables in wildlife-friendly gardens. The scheme, called Coronation Gardens for Good and Nature, for Food and Nature, beg your pardon, is part of His Majesty's vision for treasuring nature and living more sustainably. King Charles wants people to use any space around their homes, including balconies, to grow healthy food, to eat or to plant vegetables and fruit trees.
You know, that's a cracking idea as well, isn't it?
It is.
You know, we've all got... Well, if you have got a garden, it's probably got a square patch of grass like mine with, you know, shrubs around the edges and things like that. And actually, we could be putting them to better use, couldn't we?
Well, I've spent so many hundreds of pounds trying to get a few carrots and tomatoes going. And they get destroyed by slugs and snails the first time it rains.
You tried raised beds?
I've tried all that. I've tried coffee granules, I've tried bits of broken glass, I've tried literally everything. And I just had the opposite of green fingers, brown fingers.
Well, no, if you're fighting slugs, they're difficult, I agree, and that sort of completely demoralises you if you're trying to grow your own veg.
And you just watch them sort of, falling over before your eyes. As soon as it rains and they all come out, it's like Armageddon. And I've sort of given up, because you can get a bag of carrots for 40p, but it's a great idea. Go for it, but if you have a snug or snail problem like me...
Do you know, it used to be fun. My dad used to, every year, put up the bean poles,
the canes,
and you watched it grow, and it was absolutely wonderful. I don't think what he did about slugs. If you've got a good slug remedy for Martin here, get in touch, won't you? Because it's GBViews at GBNews.com, of course.
Moving on to our next story now. Banks have pledged more protection for homeowners as mortgage rates soar after the Bank of England increased interest rates to a whopping 5%.
Banks and building societies are going to offer more flexibility, allowing borrowers to temporarily change their mortgage terms, for instance, to go something interest-only for up to 6 months if they're struggling to afford the new rates. I wonder how they'll prove to their mortgage lender that they're struggling.
Well, we'll find out soon, because following yesterday's meeting with the UK's leading banks, Jeremy Hunt stressed that the 6-month flexibility on switching terms would not affect credit scores, as it may have done previously.
Is it enough, though? Or could the government be actually doing much more to help people struggling with mortgage payments? Joining us this morning to discuss it is political commentator for Young Voices UK, Ben Cope. Hello, Ben.
Good morning.
Are you a mortgage struggler, or are you going to be?
Unfortunately, I haven't managed to get on the mortgage ladder just yet, so I'm not. But I've been following it very closely because it's clearly a massive issue facing the country right now.
Are you one of those, a bit like a couple of my sons, who think, thank goodness I didn't get a mortgage when I wanted one a couple of years ago, because now I'd be in real trouble, real trouble?
Yes, I'm part of that sort of slightly strange age group where, you know, while you realise that it's a very bad thing for the country, for me personally, there may be some benefits to some falling house prices right now.
That's worth pointing out, Ben, that the scheme is voluntary. At the moment, Barclays and I believe HSB have signed up for this, and obviously there'll be pressure on others to follow suit. But it is a pretty good thing, though, right? If you're on a chunky repayment mortgage, a couple of grand a month, go to interest only, no penalty, no credit rating affected, you could be saving £1,000 or more. So that's a good thing. But I have a caveat. Are people saving that money going to splurge it on other things and drive inflation up anyway?
Well, that is exactly the question that Jeremy Hunt would have been asking himself as he weighed up how this scheme should work over the last few days, because they're very aware that as interest rates have risen and risen, as you said, the Bank of England raising interest rates by 0.5 percentage points this week, taking them to 5%, increasing mortgage rates to unaffordable levels for many people. They really feel a need to intervene to do something as mortgage repayments just get higher and higher and higher. But at the same time, the reason why the Bank of England are increasing rates as they have been is obviously to curb inflation, to make debt more expensive, to try and suck some money out of the economy. So yes, this is an inflationary measure in inflationary times by Jeremy Hunt. And while mortgage holders will be no doubt relieved that they are going to be receiving some options of support, a lot of other people in the economy, no least renters, will be frustrated that, you know, that they're not receiving any support, and this will just prolong the cost of living crisis for them.
Well, they are in a way, I suppose, because everything has a knock-on effect, doesn't it? And there are many buy-to-let, and people renting are paying landlords, aren't they? And if those landlords get into trouble because they can't afford their mortgage payments anymore, then the rent goes up. So everything has a knock-on effect, I guess. I don't know what you hear from other people in Young Voices, but there's a report in today's Times saying a quarter of middle-class parents are stepping in to help their children cover the cost of their mortgages already. Some are making sacrifices to their own retirement plans or selling spare assets, such as a second car, to ensure that their children can continue living in the homes they've just bought with a mortgage they can no longer afford. Do you hear that at all?
You hear a lot of it, and you also hear a lot of parents where they can trying to help their children get on the housing ladder, whether that's through the initial deposit or some early repayments. You know, these are, as we've said, really difficult times for mortgage affordability, particularly for young people who potentially don't have as much savings to fall back on. So yes, there's definitely a bit of a sort of voluntary generational wealth transfer here, with parents feeling the need to step in and help their children during this really difficult mortgage crisis.
Yeah, the bank of mum and dad, Ben, is a very important bank for many people, and they're not ones to get an interest holiday. I wondered, I was in Barnsley on Thursday night with about 100 GB News viewers. Nigel Farage show, Michelle Juby show was up there. This topic came up, and people are furious about interest rates climbing and climbing. And a lot of people there, Ben, were blaming the Bank of England themselves. Printed £900 billion, more or less, during the pandemic. Quelle surprise. You know, inflation has gone up. How much do you think we're being penalised for their own mistakes?
I think the Bank of England has a lot to answer for here. As you said, there was a lot of money printed during the pandemic, and of course coming off, you know, over a decade of quantitative easing following the financial crisis. But I think the main thing was just how the Bank of England is meant to be a forward-looking institution, because obviously whenever they increase interest rates, there's a transmission mechanism where it takes some time for the interest rate rises to filter through into the economy. But every time it seems like they've been playing catch-up, reacting to the latest news. Obviously this week we saw them raise interest rates by more than was forecast, one day after higher than expected inflation figures. So it's always felt like they've been playing catch-up. Earlier, I think it was March 2021, Andrew Bailey, the governor, said that he thought that inflation was going to be transient. I think only in March this year, he said he thought that inflation was going to be falling very quickly. So, and his statement yesterday was very odd. He was blaming employees for demanding higher wages. He was blaming companies for profiteering from the pandemic. But the one person who didn't seem to be at fault was Andrew Bailey, the person who presumably should be responsible for the UK's inflation. So I think, yes, he has an awful lot to answer for, and a lot of people will be looking at his term date as governor, which is supposed to go on to 2028, and thinking, is that really a viable term for him to see out?
Yeah, I mean, so many people are calling for his head, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Sorry you're not on the property ladder yet, but maybe it's the best that could have happened in the circumstances, as you're having to say to so many young people at the moment. Thank you.
But it's true, though, and people are really angry about this, because, I mean, they're getting squeezed on their food bills, on their utility bills. They're not getting any saving rates back in return for interest rates going up, and they're really sort of existing, a lot of people, not so much living anymore. And the Bank of England just feels like it's hammering people.
Yes, and it should be managing better than that.
Yeah.
I was saying this to Stephen yesterday. By the way, Stephen's off today, but he'll be back tomorrow. Martin's very bravely stepping in. You'd expect somebody as clever as the Governor of the Bank of England to be blinking clever and actually be able to sort this out without loading it onto us.
In a sense.
That, in his effect, what he's done.
Yeah, and, Liam Halligan, the economics editor of GBNews, was saying, he's got one job and he's not doing that job. And if you don't perform at that level, why do you keep your job? It would seem to me, in any ordinary business, if you're not meeting the criteria, you get the job. This guy seems to be, the Teflon Don. Yeah,
and he said, didn't he, in his opening statement a couple of days ago, he said, it's going to be very hard for some people, but this is the only way to get hold of inflation. But yeah, he can say that, can't he? But
what he can say, because he's on about 600 grand salary.
Well, exactly.
So it's easy for him to say, but it's not the reality of people in bonds. Like I said, they're really, really feeling the pinch. And no doubt you are out there too. Let us know what you think about the Bank of England. GB Views at GB News.
Meanwhile, as tributes pour in for the crew of the Titan, that submersible, we ask what happens next in a couple of moments. This is Breakfast on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin this morning. Do remember to get in touch. So many of you already have, particularly when we asked, did you join the armed services? And if you did at something like the age of 16, what do you think? And we are inundated already. Jason says, my son was 16 when he joined the Navy. He found it very emotionally tough, but got through it. Now he's 21, a leading hand, looking after £40 million worth of equipment on a Type 45 destroyer.
It's just absolutely fantastic. I really hope that this will provoke a reaction, and the comments are really emotional. It's just wonderful. Steve says, I joined as an apprentice in 1966, age 15 and 11 months, so a month early. I signed on to stay until I was 30. I stayed for 25 years. I wouldn't change a thing. The best thing I ever did. Well done, Steve.
Daryl says, morning, Daryl. I joined the army at 16 and served in the Grenadier Guards for 7 years. It's the best thing I ever did, and it gave me a lifelong sense of responsibility and duty and installed discipline into me, which I've always had. I would recommend it for any young person.
Yeah, and one more in that same vein. Alan says, I joined the Royal Signals at 15 and a half. In 1968, I went to the then Army Apprentices College in Harrogate. Intake 68B, still remembers. Spent 37 years in the army, loved it all, and I'll do it all again.
No, I got one more. John says, in 1977, I joined the Royal Navy when I was 16 and a half. I left school at Easter break. I did my exams in the Royal Navy when I was older. I did 10 years and learned a great trade. I travelled the world and I made lifelong friends. I'm getting upset now. This is lovely. Yeah. Keep them coming in, please do. GBviews at gbnews.uk, and we'll read them out in just a few minutes as well.
Very better British, and thanks for all of your service.
Thank you. Thanks for your service, exactly. Now, Canadian officials are launching an investigation into the loss of that OceanGate sub. A team of investigators are now travelling to St John's, Newfoundland, to gather information. Yeah, the US Coast Guard have said debris was consistent with a catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber and that the bodies may never be recovered. Indeed. Would you go on a daring underwater expedition to view the Titanic? We talked earlier, didn't we, about it's the lure of that amazing ship and the hold it seems to still have on our psyche. Well, somebody who knows all about that is historian Gareth Russell. He declined to go on a trip with OceanGate in 2021, even though he's a Titanic expert. Should we talk to him now? Very good morning to you. Can you...
Morning, how are you?
Well, I'm fine. It's very sad when we think of what happened to the crew of the Titan. But I guess we can all understand their fascination with the Titanic. Can you explain why we are still so mesmerised by what happened to that ship?
I suppose yes, absolutely. It is an incredible story. Sometimes people ask why it is more famous than other shipwrecks, even of the same time, thinking of the Lusitania that was torpedoed by the Germans in 1915. I think part of it is the Titanic took 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. And so people on board had time to figure out they were in trouble, to react in certain ways, and it becomes a kind of morality play on how you would respond to impending death. And also, of course, the hubris of it being the greatest technological achievement of its era and still being destroyed by nature. And it's interesting, as you say, that kind of fascination that brought the people on the Titan into the ocean, because I think there is an element of which it's almost, for some people, not a pilgrimage, but there's a cachet in saying you saw it. So it has become such a fixture in pop culture because of movies and things like that, that I think some people have an added fascination in wanting to say that they physically saw it through the porthole of the submarine.
Well, you did, didn't you? You wanted to go and see it.
I was offered. I didn't want to. I didn't. To be clear, I didn't get far enough into really investigating the submarine. It's now become clear that another of my colleagues did and had serious safety concerns about it, as we're hearing from quite a few people. It was very early on in production meetings, and I sort of caught from just the tone that I said, sorry, can I just check, do you expect me to get in the submarine? Is that what we're discussing? And I said no, simply because I don't think it would be a particularly pleasant journey. I don't think it's a wise journey. And also, I don't love enclosed spaces. It is a very small space for quite a length of time. And also, without sounding too reductive, it's a pretty small window. It's very limited visibility. And I thought, I'm actually not sure that I will see anything really through this window that I wouldn't see perhaps in better definition on the cameras sent back up to the footage sent back up to the surface.
And Gareth, serious questions are now being asked about the suitability of the craft, its seaworthiness, full stop, seem to be corners cut in its manufacture. Do you think these kind of expeditions should carry on, or should we pause and have a proper safety overview so we avoid any further disasters in the future?
Great question. I mean, we've just found out this morning that OceanGate have closed their doors, the business that ran this, and there's speculation in the US press that they have done this to avoid what will presumably be an avalanche of litigation. I don't think that's speaking out of turn there. I think there's going to be some serious questions, and that those questions will take on a legal hue. I personally am not convinced that there is any more archaeological, for want of a better word, justification for these trips. I should say one of the gentlemen who died in the Titan, Paul Henri Nochelet, is contributed hugely to the development of submarines and deep sea dives. And actually, not a lot of people know this, the Titanic was discovered in a Cold War mission. It was the sort of a perfect cover story. The US Navy, were looking for 2 missing nuclear submarines. And that was part of how it was discovered. So those Titanic dives have really contributed over the years to our knowledge of how to dive to the deep. And it's also contributed to the field of microbiology as well. But my argument would be it's done that. It has served its purpose. And certainly if you look at the OceanGate submarine, it wasn't exactly at the forefront of nautical technology, to put it mildly. So I do think the wisest thing to do by a long shot is to stop these, at least for a while. And certainly I personally don't think there should ever really have been commercialized dives to it. I think it mixes profit with safety in a way that quite clearly corners were cut. It's not in anyone's best interests, I think.
And there are some columnists in today's newspapers reflecting on that, saying, I think somewhere along the line we've forgotten that this is a mass grave. Human beings died on that ship, and maybe it should be treated with more respect.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I sort of go back and forth on this, because I think, hundreds of people go to the Tower of London every day, and they go to Gettysburg, and they tour the former trenches on the Western Front. Many historical sites are, by their nature, graveyards. So I think visiting it is one thing. I think where other people have concerns that is justified is that there's no regulation on what these submarines can or can't do when they get down to the wreck of the Titanic. It's not owned by anyone. It's in international waters. And so I think there are serious concerns that these dives are sort of in a no man's land and can do what they like. And that is really inappropriate. And no major historical site would be treated like that if it was on land.
So, Gareth, that update you just gave us, that the company has gone into receivership or liquidation, presumably. Yeah. They're doing that so they have no assets, so there's nothing to be able to sue. Their insurance presumably will be invalidated at that moment. That's going to be another grave insult to those who've perished.
Yeah, it is. It's stand by your mess, to put it sort of colloquially, I suppose. But you were warned. That it's now become very clear. They were told time and time again. I mean, Anne, you mentioned that I had this discussion in 2021, and it was a colleague who brought up safety concerns, and that was 2 years ago. And it's since emerged that there have been several people who pulled out of the dives because they saw language in the waivers that made them uncomfortable, that was unusual. They saw things about the construction of the Titan that were questionable. It also, I mean, it's even the name of the Titan, I remember thinking was a bit strange. There was sort of in Titanic lore, about 14 years before the Titanic sank, a sci-fi novelist called Morgan Robertson, I think, wrote a book about a luxury liner called the Titan that hit an iceberg and sank. Yeah. And people have sort of said, you know, did he foresee the future or something? But I thought, you know, that's a pretty famous link to something not going well in the Atlantic. So there have been many questions, both serious and slightly more superstitious, I suppose, that OceanGate just have not listened to. And it looks feeble and morally bankrupt to sort of step away from this when they should be, as you say, at the very least taking some form of culpability after, even if they weren't necessarily prepared to do so before.
Yeah, of course, they lost their much-loved CEO. We should remember he gave his life, I suppose, in one way. But you're speaking to us from Belfast, which, of course, is the home of the fantastic Titanic experience.
It is, and the Titanic's allure will continue. Of course it will. But I think what this might remind us is, for all the fascination it has, it's become such a fixture in popular culture that it's seen as fascinating and slightly benign. I think we need to remember it itself, the physical Titanic, is fascinating but deadly. It is an extremely dangerous place to go to, and even when you get there are so many things still on the Titanic. It was a 46,000-ton ocean liner. There are many things that could fall, that have fallen in the years since it was discovered, and trap or damage a submarine that even gets there. So I think we need to see the Titanic as, yes, very interesting, but also not something that should be trifled with lightly.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you. Wonderful to talk to you about that. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Have you ever been to see the Titanic experience in Belfast?
No, I've been to Belfast, but I was doing other things.
Fab! Yeah. I can't tell you. Yeah. They've recreated the staircase. You know, the middle staircase. Yeah. And they do banquets there and everything. I think you can do weddings and stuff like that there. But they say, don't call it a museum, it's an experience, and it really is. Yeah. It shows you how Titanic was built, of course, in Belfast, and where it was built and how, and the lives of the workforce that put it together. Absolutely, that's the way. If you want to find out more about Titanic, go to Belfast. It's the biggest driver of tourism in Northern Ireland.
Superb. Yeah. And he was a fantastic guest. I mean, so knowledgeable, and I think that there are real questions to ask, but that notion of we should respect this now and maybe back off.
Well, because as he said, it's dangerous. It's crumbling. The sea is reclaiming it.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating when you think of it, because it's built of iron and steel, and yet still nature is reclaiming it very gradually. And
maybe these kind of things just show us that nature is a monumental force sometimes to be respected and not meddled with.
Jasmine's got in touch. Hi, Jasmine. Makes a very interesting point. You say the Titanic went down in 1912. There's no comparison between the two. That's the latest tragedy, of course. The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable, and people were simply going on a cruise. Well, actually, they were transatlantic, weren't they? They were getting to New York. The risk should have been minimal. The Titan sub was plainly a very dangerous enterprise, undertaken by explorers who were used to taking risks. They were warned of the dangers, but they went anyway. Both events tragic, but otherwise totally different.
And in many ways, sort of linked, though, aren't they? They're linked by the sort of tragic ending. I guess that'll be something to pore over in the future. Yeah. But for now, the bodies are still there. It's now an underwater grave. And what happens next is anybody's guess.
You won't stop people going down there, will you?
Don't think it will. The fascination is so great.
Yeah, but hopefully in a much more safe way from now on.
OK. Well,
best way to get rid of slugs?
Go on.
Beer traps, according to Wendy. Morning, Wendy. Because Martin's having trouble with his slugs.
I am, yes.
Just get a couple of empty tin cans and half fill with cheap beer. The slugs are attracted to the yeast odour in the beer, and they get into the tin cans, but then they can't get out again. You'll be amazed by how effective it is.
What a way to go, drowning in beer.
Nicola says, my garden was plagued by slugs. Nematodes solved the problem. My herbaceous borders have flourished since spraying the ground every year with nematodes.
What's nematodes?
I wish I knew the answer to that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds great, but what are they? I need to Google
they're living organisms, aren't they?
I'll Google it on the ad break.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for those. I appreciate your feedback, because I do everything I put there. Sunflowers, carrots, tomatoes gets obliterated by the bivalves. Are they bivalves or molluscs? Anyway, they kill it all. So thanks for your input.
We'll find out about nematodes. Do stay with us. Coming up next, all the news and views from Saturday's newspapers. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin this morning. Hi.
And in the papers today, the Telegraph has a lovely photo of the Prince and Princess of Wales arriving at Royal Ascot by carriage yesterday.
Yeah, she's in all of the papers, actually. Kate looked wonderful, as she always
fabulous.
does. Yeah. The Daily Star's got a great photo of super jockey Frankie Dettori jumping for joy as he celebrates his win at Royal Ascot.
Super Frankie. And the Times leads with a photo from Glastonbury as fitness expert Joe Wicks, the lockdown hero, remember him, puts the festival crowd through its paces. A mass workout.
Yeah, he was big in during the pandemic, during lockdown, wasn't he?
Kept us
The
sane.
Mail, meanwhile, has a photo of the top banking bosses leaving Number 10 after holding talks to help us all struggling with our bills, particularly mortgages.
OK, it's time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning is writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth, alongside the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Top of the morning to you both. Thanks for coming in. So, Kev, let's kick off with you. And it's a story from the Times front page, pay blow for millions of public sector workers. What's going on?
Yeah, so if you remember, we're sort of just got over the last round of public sector pay talks and all the strikes that flowed from that. And we've got the next round coming up for 23-24, and what the Times are saying is that the independent peer review bodies are recommending pay rises of around 6.5% for teachers, 6% for police officers and prison officers and junior doctors. However, the government are saying that's unaffordable. We can't do it, so they're going to overrule, the Times says, these pay review bodies, and once again, I think, setting up another clash with public sector unions. More strikes in the run-up to the general election. Not a great look for the government. And it also calls into question, what is the point of a peer review body being independent if the government's
Yes, if they're going to completely ignore it.
Totally. So,
but what else can they do at the moment?
Well, at the moment, obviously,
I mean, everybody's claiming... yeah.
And I heard you talking earlier about the Bank of England governor saying, we've got to dampen down wage rises because it just makes the problem worse. Well, this is another clash.
Isn't that a good point, though, Candice? Inflation is running rife, and, pumping in inflation-busting pay rises for public sector workers, it can only make things worse.
Well, yes, I think this is what they've discovered, that actually pay rises have led to this sort of spiral where prices just continually go up, so people get pay rises corresponding to that, and you never solve the core problem of reducing demand. Having said that, though, I do feel for ordinary people. They're just trying to make ends meet. That's why they're getting pay rises. You know, they just want to pay their energy bills, pay their mortgage, pay their rent. And this is the problem with having to reduce demand in this sense, because it is for things that people really do need to live. You know, they need to have a car, they need to pay their mortgage, they need to buy food.
And also, these a pay rise at 6.5% at the moment would still be a real terms pay cut.
Yes, it still would, yeah.
It's at 8.7% at the moment.
I mean, well, we've got junior doctors going on the longest ever strike they ever have.
Absolutely.
Coming up. It just goes on. Can I whiz ahead to the Times and these stories about furries?
Yeah.
What's going on? This is the business of children identifying as animals and being taken seriously by teachers.
Yes, yes. So this is a story in the Times, and it's interesting the way the Times handled this. They didn't totally deny that this is going on, because a lot of people just are incredulous at the idea that children can identify as animals and they're being taken seriously. So this piece has Catherine Birbelsing, the head teacher, who's been very outspoken about this, who says it's a real phenomenon. But then they also considered the fact that a lot of this may be overblown. And we don't know the full extent to which this is going on, because Ofsted have denied that it is happening. They've said they haven't heard any reports of this. What they do mention, which I think is interesting, is the role that TikTok is playing in this and sort of fueling these fads.
Exactly, it's fueling. But apparently, and I don't know why we're showing the front page of The Guardian there, actually, we're not talking about that, we're talking about The Times. But apparently, in one instance, a child said, I am a dog. I am identifying as a dog, and I'll hang out with my pack of dogs. He does. He I think it's a he. He goes around with other children who are identifying as dogs, and they bark during lessons.
Yes. I know.
I mean, this is utterly ridiculous.
It is. It's just attention-seeking behaviour, and it's just teachers just need to be able to have the authority in the classroom to say, stop it. If you want to do this at home, stuff that you're seeing on TikTok, that's fine, but it doesn't happen in the classroom.
But I was going to say, aren't teachers worried about doing that?
That's the problem.
Because they're being taught to be woke, I suppose.
Yes, they feel very, very boxed in, and this is what Catherine Birbelsing has said. You know, teachers don't... They're always consulting external guidance for these things, rather than just using their instincts as adults to be like, enough now.
Isn't that part of the problem, Kev? You know, this is the monster of our own creation. If anybody can identify as anything they want, then children are going to be children. They're going to play with the rules, they're going to mess with your heads, they're going to push boundaries, and guess what? Now we've created a right old situation.
Well, and it sounds to me like it's kids at the wind-up. You know what it's like when you were at school yourself. There was always somebody in your class who would hum, really in low-level humming or whistling, and he's like, who's that? No one, sir. No one, sir. You know, it's just a wind-up. Yes. And the interesting thing here, I think, as well, is that Ofsted and the Association of School and College Leaders, they say this isn't a problem at all. It's not being raised as an issue. And if you go through the story, there's no one's been identified as, there's no sort of tangible examples of it. So I wonder whether this is being...
Are we all being wound up here?
I think so.
We have to be careful with that. Like you were saying, like it could be a moral panic. You know, we don't want to fall into moral panic. And I think good questions can be asked, though, of the influence that social media has on children when they're developing, and they're so impressionable at that age.
So what's really, really interesting about this is, even though the cat story may be, you know, slightly ridiculous, what was really fascinating was the teacher at Rye College in question absolutely chastised the person who queried this and said you should go to a different school. So actually this is a story about self-identity leading towards a completely dictatorial method of thinking about it. You're not allowed to challenge this, because if you do, you're some sort of transphobe or bigger. But actually, when you're saying a child can't be a cat, Anne, you're talking the truth.
Yes. I mean, it's so ridiculous. That's what I mean. It's so ridiculous. You wonder why we're talking about it. You wonder why there are headlines about it. And that's the worry, that it's gaining its own momentum, isn't it?
Yes. And there's no actual evidence that it is a problem at all.
But if there's anyone watching at the moment who's heard that it has happened to you or your school or anything like that, where a child has identified, and maybe others identified as an animal, and they see it as their fundamental right to do so, then get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. But it's almost, I can't believe it. You just can't believe it. And yes, it could be happening. But it clearly is happening big on TikTok and things.
Yep.
That's the point.
Yeah, it sounds like a fad that, you know, as I say, it's the kids see an opportunity here to wind up their teachers, as kids have done for generations, and this is just another example.
And we're all getting wound up.
But, Kat, there's another story here that's going to wind people up. Boris Johnson's latest column has just dropped in the Daily Mail. They're paying a lot of money for this. I read it. I couldn't really find a single word of substance. Could you?
Well, yeah, it does strike you that for £500,000 a year, I'm not sure that the Daily Mail are getting their money's worth.
Well, last week he just did a column about the weight loss drug and how difficult it was for him to fight his own weight problems. And this, it's nothing to do with politics. This is about the terrible tragedy that happened on the sub.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been the big news story of the week. But yeah, you read it and you get the impression that he's just trying to push up the word count at times. There's a bit here where he talks about, you know, about the Titanic itself, a piece of gleaming and luxurious technology, made of 50,000 tonnes of steel, and you think, you're just doing that to make it a word.
That's a copy and paste.
Absolutely. He's
Wikipedia or something.
That's what it reads like at times. And, you know, he's trying to make a political point that he's poking fun at, not fun, but, you know, he's having a go at the left who say, well, these people had more money than sense. Why are we spending so much money and giving so much attention to these people when, you know, there are much bigger problems like the migrants, hundreds of migrants dying off the coast of Greece, etc. And he says, you know, well, you know, these are heroes. These people are heroes. There doesn't need to be any regulation. They are. He's likening them to the polar ice cap explorers, and I don't know. It's just, as I say, it strikes you as like Boris is kind of phoning it in a little bit. You know, he's got this massive deal with the Daily Mail, and there isn't a great deal of substance thus far. He's only 2 columns in, but so far, I'm not sure they're getting
Well, he hasn't said anything in there that we haven't been discussing all week.
No,
nothing new.
No. Nothing new at all.
They'll be hoping for a bit more meat on the bone in the future, Kev, because if I was an editor, I'd be seriously scratching my head and thinking if I'm getting good value for money out of him. Anyway, we have to leave it there, Kev. And Candice, thank you so much. We'll see you again in an hour's time.
Go off and have a good drink of water, because that's what we should all be doing during this heat wave. And it's going to get even hotter over the weekend. So we're asking the question, how much is the right amount of water you should be drinking? How do you stay hydrated if you don't really like drinking water?
I get it completely wrong. I drink way too much before bedtime, which means I have to get up in the night.
Yes.
If I don't do the other way round, I have a headache. So anyway, let's find out the truth. What should we be doing? This comes as residents of Liverpool have been revealed as drinking the least amount of water, falling short of the recommended amount of 6 to 8 cups per day. That's a lot.
Well, it depends how big the cup is, I suppose, doesn't it? But yeah, they say 6 to 8 glasses, but I find it very difficult drinking that much water. Let's speak to registered dietitian and nutritionist Raquel Britsky. A very good morning. Lovely to speak to you. How much water?
Good morning.
Given that it's very hot at the moment, more than usual, how much water should the average adult be drinking?
Okay, so we have a general recommendation that should be around 8 glasses of water per day, but obviously that will depend on weight and physical activity, or if it's in the climate as well. Also, some health conditions, they will need more water or less water, so it depends. But there is a calculation that many people don't know that you can do, and I use that in my clinic. What we do, we will calculate. So you get your weight in kilos, and you multiply that by 30. So you get the amount of water in milliliters that you should be drinking daily. That's for someone that doesn't suffer with constipation. So if you do suffer from constipation, you need to get your weight, let's say you're 70 kilos, times 35, you multiply by 35, and then you get the amount of water that you should be drinking daily. So that's the way we do it. Do not wait to get thirsty, though. Because people wait to get thirsty.
Go on. Oh, there's a bit of a delay, I think, on our line.
So most people, they wait to get thirsty, so then they go and they drink the water. But actually, that's not a good indicator. And one thing that people should be aware of, they need to check how is the color of their urine. So it shouldn't be dark. So if you have a urine color that's dark, that's not pale, not clear, you definitely dehydrated right now. And yeah, that's very important that you check. So that's the first thing you should be checking. Do not wait to get thirsty, because if you're thirsty, that means you are really dehydrated.
Raquel, I did some quick mental arithmetic there. With my weight and my age, I think I'll be drinking water by the bucket, not by the cup. That's a bit of a task. Does tea count, or coffee, or even beer?
Yeah, that's a very good question. No, beer, alcohol does not count. Soft drinks, fizzy drinks, they do not count because they actually dehydrate us. So alcohol, sugar, they dehydrate. But coffee, tea, you can count that towards this calculation that I told you to do. But just remember, caffeine, you know, if you're going to have caffeine beverages, try just to not drink too much of them, obviously, because it's too much caffeine is not great for you. But also they can dehydrate a little bit. But overall, they hydrate more than they dehydrate. So it's not ideal. So the best thing you could do is obviously drinking water, filtered water. You can even have like tap water, just get a filter, you know, a cheap filter, and then, you know, you have the best thing is water.
Right, well, I think we all get that we should be drinking more than we obviously do. Raquel, thanks very much indeed. Enjoy the heat wave. Actually, it's interesting, if you go out into the office back here, everybody's got water bottles that are usually about that high, about a foot high. Maybe you get little ones. And then, have you seen, there's a stonking great big one, about that big.
Yeah, they're huge.
I could never drink that much water.
Yeah.
Keep trying. And then the other thing that gets me is, when we were cavemen, you know, you were lucky if you lived near a freshwater source, so they can't have drunk that much when we were cavemen.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's an unfashionable thing to say. I find water really boring. I just find it really boring to drink. I mean, I put ice in it, put a bit of lemon in it, put a slice
put a tiny bit of orange juice in it.
Yeah, just a little nip of cordial, perhaps. I know you shouldn't, but hey, no water.
No, if it makes you drink the water, yeah, good.
But surely you can drink like a gallon of tea, and that counts. I can drink
no,
tea.
because tea itself is a diuretic, isn't it? Yeah, so it will dehydrate you.
Damn.
Yes, I know. It's the same with Bacardi and Coke, you know.
Yeah.
It's just not the same as drinking water. Thank you so much for getting in touch. We've had some, again, we were asking about, because it's Armed Forces Day, in a few moments' time we'll be sort of looking at that again. But what about, you were talking about the youngest age you can go into the army, and there was talk about taking it up from 16 to 18.
That's right.
But so many of you already have been in touch saying that you were in the army or one of the armed forces at the age of 16. John says, I joined the army at the age of 16, served for 12 years in the regulars and a further 8 years in the territorials. I had a great time, learned a trade, travelled the world. It was a period of my life that I now look back on with many fond memories and pride in what my colleagues and I achieved in various deployments.
Yeah, there is so many messages saying the same thing. It would take us all day to read them out. But what's coming through here in the droves from Mark, from Alan, from Daryl, from Carl, from John, from Andy, from Vic, you're all saying you'd do it all again in a heartbeat. The happiest days of your life, and joining up at 16 was a privilege.
More to come, of course. We will be looking at how the nation is going to celebrate Armed Forces Day today. First of all, though, you'll want to know about the weather.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It is set to be quite a humid weekend for all of us as we feed in some very mild, if not hot, air from the southwest. We do have high pressure in charge across southeastern areas, helping it to keep fairly dry and settled. But further towards the north and west, frontal features pushing their way through will bring outbreaks of rain to parts of Scotland, gradually moving up towards the Highlands and the Northern Isles as well. Elsewhere, some of the drizzle across parts of Cumbria into the Lake District will fizzle its way out. Whilst it has been quite a cloudy start for the vast majority, it will break up as we head into the afternoon, allowing for some brighter, sunnier spells to develop. In that sunshine, climbing to highs of the mid-20s for Northern Ireland, central Scotland, but close towards 30 degrees Celsius in some southeastern areas. So really quite hot, and do remember that UV levels will be very high. There will be some late evening sunshine as well as the cloud continues to break up, and generally staying dry for the vast majority of us overnight with some clear intervals. It is, though, with those southerly winds, going to be another humid and muggy night for the vast majority of us. Again, towns and cities holding up around 17, maybe 18 degrees Celsius in a few spots as well. So it could be quite uncomfortable for sleeping tonight. Then first thing into Sunday, it's watching this feature as it pushes into parts of Northern Ireland, could provide some very heavy rainfall and then push into northwest Scotland, and then later on we'll be migrating towards England, Wales, with some thunderstorms developing ahead of that across parts of Yorkshire down into Lincolnshire. Torrential downpours are possible with some surface water and localised flooding issues. Temperatures again on the hot side, climbing towards 31 degrees Celsius in the south, but further towards the west we are starting to feed in some slightly fresher air, and that's the theme as we head into the new working week. Generally those temperatures turning less hot than we have seen them, but rather unsettled. Bye-bye.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant Rebecca Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
And a very good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. You're watching Breakfast here on GB News.
And of course, today is Armed Forces Day. We're celebrating that all day. Magnificent men in their flying machines, their red arrows fly past today. Can't wait for that down in Falmouth and Cornwall.
It's nice to start the day with good news. And then, on the other hand, you've got the banks who are pledging more protection for homeowners as mortgage rates soar after the Bank of England increased interest rates to 5%. But is what they're doing enough?
And Guns N' Roses are set to headline the second full day of Glastonbury later on with the festival. Steph Tetchy will be there with the latest.
It's a hot and humid weekend to come for many of us. Join me later for the full GB News weather forecast.
And if you were watching us a few minutes ago, keep drinking the water. You're watching Breakfast. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Dordley, in for Stephen Dixon. And this is Breakfast on GB News.
And as we were saying, it's just after, a week of starting the programme on very, very grim news, it's lovely to start with this because it is Armed Forces Day. And Cornwall is preparing to host the national celebrations for Armed Forces Day for the very first time.
Yeah, a series of events will be held across the country with the main displays centred around Falmouth.
Yeah, it's going to feature over 1,000 service personnel and bands who are going to parade through the town centre in the largest and longest military parade ever held in the UK, apparently.
It's going to be splendid. Onlookers will then be treated to another fly past from the Red Arrows, two in a week after the coronation, a parachute drop by the RAF and a music concert in the evening.
It's going to be fab. Let's have a look. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody looks ahead to a day of military might and celebration.
They say the people of Cornwall will never have seen anything like this. Marching bands, military inspections, flypasts, the might of the British Armed Forces on full display. 100,000 people are expected to descend on Falmouth today. The aim? To show support for the men and women who make up the armed forces, from currently serving troops to service families, veterans and cadets. There's a military parade at 11 o'clock. Over 1,000 service personnel, marching bands galore. Then in the afternoon, all eyes turn to the sky. Red Arrows, Navy Merlin helicopters, Spitfires, and wrapping up with a prom-style concert in the evening. It's the 15th Armed Forces Day. Cornwall Council says it's honoured to have won the bid to host this year's festivities. It's costing Cornish taxpayers £350,000, some saying it's inappropriate given the cost of living crisis, biting particularly hard in the Duchy. But it's expected to bring in around £7 million in revenue. Organisers say the event will be a chance to take photos, to make memories, and above all, to celebrate peace. A peace that's been hard fought for, hard won. A peace that's lasted 80 years. Jeff Moody, GB News.
It just looks like it's going to be an incredible day out.
Day.
What a great weather for it as well. Just can't wait to see that. Well, back in the studio here, we're now joined by two incredible reservists from the Army. To my left, Charlie Peters, GB News documentary legend, and over there to Anne's right, Mr. Mayrick with the RAF. Let's start with you, Charlie. Armed Forces Day. Tell us how important it is to everybody in the Armed Service family.
Well, today is especially important for GB News as we have signed the Armed Forces Covenant today.
Yeah, what is that? Can you explain?
The Covenant is a promise to the nation from those who sign it to ensure that members of a community or an organisation such as GB News will pledge to commit and support the Armed Forces community through work, through remembrance and through engagement activities. And so it's a way of really showing your commitment and your pledge and your promise to the people of the Armed Forces and to allow people within the organisation, such as myself and Mayrick, to stand up and serve while also working.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the next question then, maybe for you. Why are you a reservist?
I think for me it's to serve my country. I think it's super important. There's also, through doing the work in the RAF, I've met friends for life. I've learnt so many different skills that supplements my day job here at GB News.
Yeah, but you're working hard out there in the newsroom.
Absolutely.
And how do you find the time, or how does that work?
Well, I think when you split up your weekends a year and you think, how can you make your spare time count? And it absolutely shows. It sounds like sometimes it could be a big commitment, but it's absolutely not. And you think you need to make your spare time count, a weekend a month and a bit more than that. But absolutely, you can go away with them. I've had fantastic times.
Did you both become reservists separately? And
do you know what? I didn't know he was a reservist until this week.
Is that right?
A lot of the time, I think people at work keep quiet about their reserve service or aren't so keen to talk about their military service. There are over 2 million working-age veterans in Britain, many of whom we just don't know about. And we need to, generate a culture where people can talk more confidently about their service in the armed forces, and that's why the Covenant is so great.
And I wonder, Charlie, we were speaking earlier, so my brother-in-law, my former brother-in-law, was a US Marine. And when I would be in America, he'd be mobbed in airports, people getting selfies with him, thank you for your service, complete strangers. We don't quite have that sort of same attitude in the UK, do we? You think we just don't give enough respect
I'm not
to
sure.
the armed forces?
I'm not sure that's the case. I think the British people, love and respect the armed forces and the work they do. Perhaps we have a more quiet sentimentality than our American cousins, and I've always enjoyed working with Americans and enjoyed working over there and with our colleagues in the US Marine Corps as well. But sure, I think Britons, generally speaking, do really respect and appreciate the service of the armed forces.
Yeah, you just wonder, it's a great day today, but you just wonder whether we shouldn't show our respect in other ways the rest of the year.
Yeah.
I just got this from Andy, morning Andy, who got in touch. He said, I signed up at 15 years and 9 months old into the Boy Entrance Scheme in 1960. I served 37 years. I've worked and lived all over the world. I had a varied and hard-working, enjoyable career. But I would add that whenever I visit the US, I get far more privileges for being a veteran than ever in the UK.
No.
And I wonder, both of you guys, we're talking about the age of signing up, 16 at present, but there was talk a couple of weeks ago of increasing the age to 18, but we've been absolutely inundated by former army men, servicemen, RAF men and women saying that joining at 16 was a tremendous opportunity for them, the making of the man, the making of the woman, the making of the person. We shouldn't be denying people that privilege, should we?
I think most people in this country recognise that the armed forces allows ordinary people to do really extraordinary things and gives you a pathway to a whole new world of opportunity and life. And that's remarkably exciting. And also, I think in the reserves, this is about appreciating the talent that the whole country has to offer. Our best assets, as all people in the military always say, is our people, the people that sign up, that do the duty and wear the uniform. So expanding that opportunity where possible and making it more of a thing about pride and opportunity is always brilliant.
Could either of you be called up for service or deployment somewhere? Or
absolutely
like
could,
yes.
Absolutely could, yeah. And that's the opportunity. And, as now GBNews supports it, it's something that we could go away, but they would, keep our position here whilst we're away. So that's fantastic news to hear from GBNews. But absolutely, we could go away with the RAF or the Army and support and work alongside our regular counterparts.
How does it feel wearing that uniform?
I think it makes me immensely proud. I have a family history in the RAF, so for me, to do my family proud, but also to serve my country, I think is massively important.
How does it feel for you, wearing the uniform?
Second to none. It's the best feeling in the world.
Is it?
Yes. And sometimes I'm a part-time soldier, full-time banging on about it. But I do, I do really love it. And in work and your normal life, your civilian world, your career will change. You might meet new people. But with the military, I intend to serve a full career in the reserves, and I'll have the same comrades throughout.
And it's tremendously, gives me a sense of huge pride to know that GBNews is standing with its covenant, getting behind our armed forces. Because I think oftentimes the media has a slightly sort of negative attitude towards the forces, or it can do. It talks all about the problems that servicemen face after they leave the forces. But how relevant and how important is GBNews getting behind this to you?
Well, extremely important. And I think, a key pledge within our promise to the nation through the Covenant is to engage with local military units, not only to our London studios, but also we just heard from Jeff Moody there in the southwest, and I think we're speaking to Sophie Reaper in the northwest later today to allow our regional reporters to really engage with the local armed forces community and really hear what they know, what they see, and what they experience.
You only have to look at the response we've already had from so many people watching. The strength of feeling. Bob says, a Royal Marine pal bet me I wouldn't make the grade as RAF aircrew. It was 1969 and the bet was for an M&S Bry nylon shirt, £1.9 and 11. I applied, I was successful, and I was commissioned as a navigator. I was awarded the Sword of Honour on graduation. I served 17 years and saw the world. Experience of a lifetime.
It's obviously to say stuff like that joining the military and the things that you achieve in the military, it shows you how far you can push yourself to moments when you thought, gosh, I don't know whether I can do this. And the things you achieve are absolutely fantastic.
And another really emotional message here from Jack, who says, I had an abusive upbringing and I escaped at 16 and joined the Royal Navy as a boy rating. It was tough, but it was exactly what I needed. I went on to serve for 27 years. I travelled to 98 countries and served in Desert Storm in 1991. Wow. I'm now 60 and just completed a fine art degree, and now I'm doing teacher training. Jack, what a magnificent story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
I mean, it gets better and better because Mark says, I grew up on a very poor Manchester overspill estate. I joined the army at 16, straight from school, and served 13 years. It made me the man I am today. It turned my life around and actually probably saved me from likely prison. God save the King.
I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, I could see you there, your chest just swelled out, Charlie. This is the beating heart of how important the armed forces are to the world, to Britain, but to GBNews viewers, absolutely adore it.
Well, some sensational CVs there. I'm rather jealous of my own military CV. Could do with a bit of polishing based on what I've just heard there. Pride is the word. You hit it square on the nail there, Martin. And it is absolutely about pride. And the opportunity to meet and to work with veterans is really important. And as I said before, over 2 million working-age veterans in Britain. I think an opportunity to expand our ability to work with these people, especially in broadcasting, we don't hear enough of these voices, I think is absolutely vital.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job there, aren't you? Just by you being here today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. When are you next doing anything with the RAF? reserves?
Oh, not too far away. So yeah, things are in the pipipeline. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Exciting. What about you?
Well, I'm on duty today from
Are you? Yes, well, you are.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. OK, well, off you go. Back to your day job. Thank you so much for coming in and telling us about that. I'm a very proud military mum. And Stephen, of course, Stephen's husband was in the military as well. So it's nice that we can be proud, isn't it? Should we bring you up to date with the rest of today's headlines?
OK, the head of Russia's mercenary group has accused the country's military of destroying his fighters and has vowed to stop the evil of Russia's military leadership. Yevgeny Prigozhin, leader of Wagner, claims the military leadership caused the deaths of 2,000 of his fighters. The news comes as Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to address the nation shortly.
Meanwhile, the First Minister of Scotland says independence for the region could bring a transformational change. He was speaking in Dundee and he's going to tell the SNP leaving the UK would give Scotland more power to build a better country. He'll also tell the convention that the Westminster economic model is causing misery to Scotland.
And a water company has blamed more people working from home after the COVID pandemic for a new hosepipe ban. South East Water will impose the first hosepipe ban of the summer from Monday, affecting households across Kent and Sussex. The company's chief executive also blamed low rainfall as well as a recent spell of hot weather, leading to a spike in demand for drinking water.
We always get into trouble when we say there's the first hosepipe ban, because there aren't. And I know you'll get in touch saying there are hosepipe bans already in place in lots of parts of the country. And also, they're now blaming, so it's low, it wasn't enough rain, and it was all our fault for being home during COVID.
Yeah, because people are at home watering their gardens, you've been very naughty. How about build some more reservoirs?
Yeah. How about manage our water better?
That could be something you could do, or repair the broken sewage and pipe systems. Stop blaming people for working from home who have to do it. It's like take a bit of accountability.
Blaming nature for not raining enough. That's unbelievable, but there you go.
Moving on to our next story. Banks have pledged more protection for homeowners as mortgage rates soar after the Bank of England increased interest rates to 5%.
Banks and building societies will apparently offer more flexibility, allowing borrowers to temporarily change to their mortgage terms for up to 6 months if they're struggling to afford the new rates.
Well, following yesterday's meeting with the UK's leading banks, Jeremy Hunt stressed that the 6-month flexibility on switching terms would not affect credit scores as it may have done previously.
Well, is it enough? Is it going to help anyone? Or could the government be doing more to help those struggling? Earlier, we spoke to the political commentator for Young Voices, Ben Cope, who said while some might be relieved with the support, it could lead to further problems.
Scheme is voluntary at the moment. Barclays and I believe HSB have signed up for this, and obviously there'll be pressure on others to follow suit. But it is a pretty good thing though, Ryan. If you're on a chunky repayment mortgage, a couple of grand a month, go to interest only, no penalty, no credit rating affected, you could be saving £1,000 or more. So that's a good thing. But I have a caveat. Are people saving that money going to splurge it on other things and drive inflation up anyway?
Well, that is exactly the question that Jeremy Hunt would have been asking himself as he weighed up how this scheme should work over the last few days, because they're very aware that as interest rates have risen and risen, as you said, the Bank of England raising interest rates by 0.5 percentage points this week, taking them to 5%, increasing mortgage rates to unaffordable levels for many people. They really feel a need to intervene to do something as mortgage repayments just get higher and higher and higher. But at the same time, the reason why the Bank of England are increasing rates as they have been is obviously to curb inflation, to make debt more expensive, to try and suck some money out of the economy. So yes, this is an inflationary measure in inflationary times by Jeremy Hunt, and while mortgage holders will be no doubt relieved that they are going to be receiving some options of support, a lot of other people in the economy, no least renters, will be frustrated that that they're not receiving any support, and this will just prolong the cost of living crisis for them.
Well, they are in a way, I suppose, because everything has a knock-on effect. doesn't it? And there are many buy-to-let and people renting are paying landlords, aren't they? And if those landlords get into trouble because they can't afford their mortgage payments anymore, then the rent goes up. So everything has a knock-on effect, I guess. I don't know what you hear from other people in Young Voices, but there's a report in today's Times saying a quarter of middle-class parents are stepping in to help their children cover the cost of their mortgages already. Some are making sacrifices to their own retirement plans or selling spare assets, such as a second car, to ensure that their children can continue living in the homes they've just bought with a mortgage they can no longer afford. Do you hear that at all?
You hear a lot of it, and you also hear a lot of parents where they can trying to help their children get on the housing ladder, whether that's through the initial deposit or some early repayments. You know, these are, as we've said, really difficult times for mortgage affordability, particularly for young people who potentially don't have as much savings to fall back on. So yes, there's definitely I guess a bit of a sort of voluntary generational wealth transfer here, with parents feeling the need to step in and help their children during this really difficult mortgage crisis.
Yes, and it does seem to be a real crisis for many people. Jason says, what I don't understand is when the banks failed, we bailed them out for up to £300 billion, but when we're struggling, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, Brian is taking a political angle on this. Isn't it a coincidence? The last time we had raging inflation was during the Thatcher Tory government, when it went up to 15%. People must be realistic. Interest rate was never going to remain at 0.45% indefinitely.
Callum says, I bought a £495,000 house, so that's nearly £500,000 this year, from a standing start with no job, no money, being mentally ill and not having no obvious way forward. I shake my head when young people say they can't get on the property ladder, or people look to the government for more and more financial help. In my experience, if you're willing to sacrifice and have some desire and focus, there is generally a way forward.
Yeah.
I don't know how you've done it, though.
Yeah, well done.
How have you done it?
Hayley raises a very good point. There are more renters in this country versus mortgage payers. Where is the help for renters? We only pay more extortionate monthly payments so the landlords can pay their expensive mortgages. Where is the help for us renters? I think a lot of people out there, Hayley, will be echoing that sentiment.
It's a very difficult one. If you were Prime Minister, what would you do? I think that's the question. And do you think what's being done at the moment is enough, or could anyone be doing better? Could any other government be doing better?
Yeah, I think people get justifiably very nervous when the government starts getting involved in the private sector markets. I think this is a good plan, I think, versus paying people's mortgages, like paying their energy bills or giving them money for furlough, because that, of course, would simply increase inflation. It would increase national debt. So this actually, I think, is a good, workable interim solution, Anne.
But is it enough? Coming up, we're going to be talking to the historian Gareth Russell, who's an expert on the Titanic, with his views on the terrible tragedy that has actually added to the death toll on Titanic, of course. We'll be talking to him in just a couple of moments.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 7:24. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin. And I was going to say, anything we're talking about today, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. But you are already in so many numbers. Absolutely fab.
Yeah, you're absolutely wide awake out there. And off the back of our previous item, we had Charlie Peters, GB News employee, who's an Army reservist, and Mr. Mayrick, an RAF reservist, and people are really moved by those people coming in.
Yeah, they're reservists. They work in our newsroom. They're producers, and nobody really knew that they were reservists.
Well, they didn't know about each other.
No, I know.
That's amazing.
But you know, actually, it made you very, very proud. Jean says, "How good to know there are still wonderful young people who are proud of our country." It made me cry.
It actually made me quite well up. I mean, what two fine, proud young men. Tracy is saying, "How proud am I to see those 2 young journalists wearing their uniforms with pride in the GB News studio."
And Andy said, "I was really pleased to hear that GB News has signed the Armed Forces Covenant. It would be really good if GB News had a regular slot to discuss armed forces and veterans issues. I served 6+ years in the Royal Green Jackets."
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Dean is saying here, "I walked out of the school gates at 16, straight into the Royal Navy.
Wow.
Taught me to lead a life of self-discipline and manners, and always respected my elders. I become 60 this year, and it helped shape my entire life." What a wonderful thing to say.
Now, we did have somebody getting in touch saying, it's great that you're covering Armed Forces Day, and I said, right, you can sit back and watch it on the television if you actually can't get to Falmouth, which is it's the headquarters of the day today is in Falmouth. Well, you can sit back and watch it on the telly, and I'll tell you how, by staying on with GB News, because from 11 o'clock, which is, I think, when it all starts kicking off in Falmouth, we will be live there, so we'll be showing everything that happens. We'll also, just before that, be joining our reporter Sophie Reaper up in Manchester, where they're obviously doing something for Armed Forces Day, and that'll be at 10:30. So if you stick with us, you'll get as much coverage as you probably would anywhere else, I think.
Yeah, Jeff Moody down in Falmouth, and, you know, I was very, very proud of the King's birthday footage. Cameron Walker did the fly pass. I think we had the best footage of any channel. It was magnificent. So to stick around, you'll get great coverage on GB News.
How about going to Cleethorpes? Kimberly says the Armed Forces weekend in Cleethorpes is an absolute must for many people from Grimsby, for instance, and further afield. Local people are so proud to hold this event, and it is fantastic. So actually get in touch with us now if you've got a particular event happening today that you want mentioned. As I said, Falmouth is very much the headquarters of it, but clearly there are big events happening all over the country. And if you want us to know about yours, then get in touch. You know how, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, and John, we're talking a lot about the age of entry, what's appropriate. The government's thinking about changing it to 18 from the current 16, but you're resolutely clear on this. You think 16 is the correct age, and so many people are getting in touch, and with their drafting when they were 16, John is one of them. I joined the RAF as a boy entrant, age 15. In 1964, served for 12 years. We had a 50-year reunion in Hereford where we did our training, and we have met up every year since. Nothing can compare with that first reunion, meeting up with comrades after years, young boys then and now gentlemen in their 70s, with so much to talk about. Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, there obviously was an apprentice, like an army apprenticeship scheme, probably for the other forces as well, that started even younger. Max says, I joined the Royal Navy at 15. I served for 32 years. I'm now a retired disabled veteran. I'm a staunch royalist, and despite my disabilities, I still march everywhere. Many great years serving the country I love. And do you want to hear this one from Steve? Said, I was so fed up with school, I tried to join at 16, but my plan came unstuck when the recruiter turned up at our house to get the paperwork signed by my parents. My mother knew I wasn't born in 58, which I'd said, but in 59. I had a place, though, as an apprentice medic, and a year later I went to the barracks. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. I spent 25 years in the army and then 20 years in the Middle East using skills given to me by the army. It is the making of men and women. I still keep in touch with many of the people I served with.
And I just want to sort of add to all that, because this is actually getting me a bit choked. I just want to say, everyone tuning in, thank you for your service. Servicemen, women.
Yeah, I think we should say it more often. I mean, we traditionally used to tell our soldiers, I think, and obviously airmen and whatever, that maybe it wasn't a good idea to march around much in your, or, to walk around much in your uniform. I don't know whether that's relaxing now, but very often you don't know that somebody is serving and or has served. So, but like when you go to the States, it's so noticeable that people grasp them and give them free stuff from the shops and whatever, because they're just so thrilled to, and they say thank you for your service.
Yep.
Shall we talk sport now? There's a lot going on in the sport world, and Aidan has joined us. Hello there.
Good morning to you both. Good to be with you. How are you?
You were on GB News last night, I think, weren't you?
I was, yeah. I know. I've just got to slip my sleeping bag. You can probably just see the zip just over the back there. No, it's how I like it. Don't worry.
What you got for us?
Yeah, look, there's a few different things. It's I wouldn't say it's silly season in the football world, but we are seeing a lot of transfers. Lots of clubs getting their jobs, their business done very, very early. We had the Champions League, the final 2 weeks ago. We had the internationals, last week, and clubs aren't messing around. We understand that bids are probably made in the last kind of few weeks of the season in the hope that you might be able to rubber stamp them at the start of the pre-season so that you can get the players off and on their pre-season tours, etc., as we mentioned yesterday. Mason Mount, Chelsea player, came through the ranks, good friend of Declan Rice, who we're going to mention in a minute. They grew up together, played at Chelsea in the youth team. Mason Mount has been the subject of a third bid, we understand, from Manchester United. So good young player there going to Old Trafford. A third bid, £50 million plus £5 million in add-ons. He plays for Chelsea right now. He's won the Champions League with him, played in the final 2 years ago. He has 1 year left on his contract now. What that tends to mean, as we know, really, is that when the players get 1 year left of his contract, that's when we see amortisation. The value goes down. In the last year of the deal, you get them for a little bit cheaper, and that's why you're seeing a player 50 million plus 5 million. It looks a little bit low for for a young player. But listen, if Man United don't pull away from this now, having made 3 bids, they're going to look a bit daft, because they can get him for nothing next summer.
Yeah, and Declan Rice becomes subject to a bit of a bidding war. So Arsenal thought they were having a clear run at this, and then whoops, in come Man City. Obviously, very deep pockets. So he's in a sort of enviable position. Does he play for Arsenal and get regular first team, but maybe not the trophies, or go to Man City and be rotated? But he'd have a definite chance of getting a sniff of some silverware there.
Yeah, he wouldn't do. I said to Anne yesterday, I think the pull of London is quite telling in this deal. I really do think that, you know, especially as he's got, you know, he's getting to that age now. He's 24. He's going to be having a family soon, I would have thought. So, but in terms of the footballing choice, I mean, I'd still edge towards Manchester City. They've just won the treble. There are players to replace there. You're playing under Pep Guardiola as well. He'll improve his game, putting him into that really elite, world-class level, I would have thought. Having said that, you look at Man City. You know, we used to see it with Liverpool sides and Man United sides back in the day. You strengthen when you're at the very, very top. You know, you're Man United, you win the treble, you sign Ruud van Nistelrooy. You know, you're Liverpool, you lose Kevin Keegan back in the 70s, you replace him with Kenny Dalglish, and when you're at the very, very pinnacle, that's the time when you need to be pushing yourself ahead. And it ruins Arsenal as well in some ways, because they've targeted Declan Rice, but they've done their business through the press effectively in the last 6 months. Everyone knows they're going for Declan Rice. So Manchester City sneak up on the inside lane and think, you know what, we don't just strengthen ourselves by doing this, we're weakening our biggest opponent in the Championship.
It seems to me you can never sit back, can you? You win the treble and you're already thinking about next year and how to improve.
It's a really good point. It's a really good point. Someone said to me about 10 years ago, sometimes you have to spend, back then it was like 50 million quid, now probably 100 quid. You have to spend 50 million pounds as a football club just to stand still.
Yes,
it's astonishing.
Yeah.
You can spend 20, I remember Fulham spending 20 back in 2007. We thought it was a colossal amount of money. I mean, they survived on goal difference at the end of the season. So it's no guarantee of success anyway. But you have to be, your supporters expect you to be delving into the market as quickly as possible. And that's why we're seeing these clubs, instead of leaving it to the last minute to get deals done, you don't want to be that club, and you don't want to be that club who's prancing around on deadline day trying to get deals done because you look desperate.
Got a bit of tennis. Not good news for another Brit.
No, Cameron Norrie out in the quarter-final. It's not the end of the world. It means he gets a clearer run at Wimbledon. I think he'll go quite deep into the championships, actually, at the All England Club. It's good to win on the grass circuit leading up to Wimbledon. It's good to have one under your belt, but there aren't that many grass courts around. Sometimes it's best to, when you've been travelling around the world for the whole year, sometimes it's best to just get settled. And he's done Queens. Yeah, OK, it's the quarter-finals, but you know, there aren't that many players, if you look back over Wimbledon, title wins that won Queens beforehand. So it's not the end of the world. I do expect him to do quite well. I do think there's a bit of a dearth of talent coming through in British tennis right now, actually.
Isn't there?
There is. I mean, you take away Emma Raducanu, who hasn't really done much for 2 years since that stunning victory. I do think she'll come back. But in the men's side as well, men's section, there isn't really a great deal of depth just there right now.
Now, why is that? Is there a reason?
Well, you know what, the money they spend is absolutely colossal. You compare it to what some of the Eastern European countries spend right now. And that would be a tiny fraction compared to what Britain spends. So there's no lack of money going in. None of our sport lacks money. There aren't many disciplines that can claim that the right isn't funded. I mean, the lottery funding has been going on for years. It's reaped dividends as well. We've won more gold medals at Olympics.
Got time for a quick bit of the Ashes. Obviously, England disappointed. Thrilling finale, but didn't get the result we wanted. Second test coming up.
Yeah, second test coming up. Moeen was quite key. Moeen Ali was quite keen in that final couple of days there. He had a problem with his spinning finger. So the one where you sort of, I'm not really...
Wrap it around.
Yeah, if you get a little bit of pain in it, I imagine it's quite uncomfortable. Yeah. But, Rayan Ahmed has been brought in. For his test day, he was 18 years old.
Wow.
So it's shades of Michael Owen in 1998, I think. But look, we'll see. I mean, it starts again next Wednesday on the 28th. It was at Edgbaston, first of all. Different dynamics at Lords. We don't know what the weather's going to be like. We think it's going to be warm. We think it's going to be, we don't know how that's going to affect the wicket. Obviously, the makeup of the grass and the crease.
Well, you'd imagine it would dry out and make it very cracked, make the ball move around a lot.
Well, you would do, yeah. I mean, so that's maybe why it's so important. We've got a leg spinner coming in, because you need in a squad, you need to have every eventuality covered, because especially in Britain when you can't even predict the weather from day to day anyway.
Superb. Fantastic. Thank you for that.
Good to see you.
OK, well, do stick. Are you coming back a bit later?
Oh, yeah, well, I can't get rid of that easily.
Right, do stick with us. We've got lots for you. We want to hear your views, remember, on all sorts of the subjects we've been talking about today. Right, now, though, we'll take a quick break, and when we're back, it's time for the paper review.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss? Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:39. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin this morning.
And let's take a look now what's in the papers. We've got Kevin Schofield and Candice Holdsworth. Let's get straight in. No, we're in the front pages first. OK, in the papers today, The Telegraph has a lovely photo of the Prince and Princess of Wales arriving at Royal Ascot by carriage yesterday.
And the Daily Star has a wonderful photo of super jockey Frankie Dettori jumping for joy as he celebrates his win at Royal Ascot.
And The Times leads with a photo from Glastonbury as fitness expert lockdown legend Joe Wicks puts the festival crowd through its paces.
There's absolutely everything going on at Glastonbury, isn't there?
Yeah.
The Mail has a photo of top banking bosses leaving number 10 after they joined in talks with Jeremy Hunt to help households struggling with their soaring bills.
OK, well, now I was so keen to jump to it. It is now time to go through the papers with Kevin Schofield and Candice Holdsworth. Candice, shall we kick off with you this time? This is a story from The Telegraph, front page. Households to be spared £120 net zero levy. Good news for consumers.
Yes, yeah. So Grant Shapps has announced that a levy that would have been placed on people's bills to help fund the hydrogen industry, like experiments in hydrogen, which is seen as a clean fuel. It won't be added to people's bills now because they are just trying to decrease pressure on people's finances because we've got the problem now of wages chasing inflation. So as much as you can save households, That's what they're trying to do. They haven't announced how it will be funded, though he said that they need to find other ways of doing it.
Are we already paying green levies on our energy bills? I mean, is it 15% of all bills is already funding subsidies?
Yes, so that was the model that was going to be used for funding hydrogen because it's been used for renewables. But obviously now, with prices going up across the board, you have to really think how much you can tax people. And if you can find other ways of doing it, it's probably preferable.
Well, meanwhile, we, of course, had this meeting at Number 10 yesterday where Jeremy Hunt, particularly, was talking to leaders of the banks to try and come up with some sort of help for us all.
Yeah, I mean, the government obviously is under an awful lot of pressure to be doing something. A lot of people on mortgages, variable rate mortgages, are seeing them go through the roof now that interest rates are going up so quickly. So yes, we dragged in yesterday, as you mentioned, several of the bosses of leading high street banks. So they've come up with some measures. I mean, tinkering around edges really, but it will make a difference to some people. So for instance, if you're threatened with repossession, you'll be granted a minimum of 12 months grace from your first missed payment, so you won't lose the roof over your head. People will be able to shift onto interest-only mortgages without it affecting their credit ratings. Obviously, that's going to help because that brings down your costs as well. The problem, though, is that interest rates are only going one way. I think they're probably going to go up again, in which case the problem's only going to get worse.
So you're just kicking it down the road
again. And again, you're right, these mortgages ultimately will have to be paid off. So you are storing up problems for the future. But the government will be pleased that Martin Lewis, money-saving expert guru, has welcomed it, which, I mean, he is so influential, that guy. If he comes out and gives it the thumbs down, that's really bad news. So he's given it a cautious
It could make a big difference to a lot of people. I've got an interest-only mortgage. I took the gamble when I bought in London that my house price would go up, and therefore I just paid the minimum. The difference between a repayment mortgage on my property was about quadruple.
So what happens with this? You pay just the interest.
You service the interest and never reduce the debt. But when you sell your house, you're hoping it's gone up enough to wipe off the debt and keep the change. So that's what will happen with the interest rate only people here. They're just paying the base rate 5%, and it will, if they have a repayment mortgage, it will significantly help their mortgage to go down if they have a sizable mortgage, which, let's face it, most are now.
Yes.
So actually, I think
if that's such a good idea, why doesn't everybody do it?
Because they want to pay their mortgage off. So it will extend the term of your loan. So it will make, effectively, you've missed 6 months repayment, so you'll be paying an extra 6 months at the end. There's no free lunch here.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
You basically pay it later.
But the issue is, you know, what's happened with the interest rates. When people initially took out their mortgages, apparently from what I've read, they were stress tested to see what would happen if it went up by, say, 3 times. But that benchmark has now been breached. So, I mean, when people initially took out their mortgage, they didn't know that there would be such a sharp rise in interest rates. So, you know, I dislike all the crowing about, well, you need to manage your finances better. They couldn't have foreseen this.
Yeah, one thing I think is really good about this, actually, which I know Martin Lewis will like, is that you won't have your finances checked. So a lot of people at the moment will be quite concerned, you know, if their pay isn't keeping, you know, matching their, you know, or maybe they've changed jobs or circumstances have changed, they won't be on the same money. You won't have a bank nosying around about what you're earning, and that's a real stress for a lot of consumers, because, like, if I don't meet the criteria, what, are they going to take my house off me? So actually, I think there's a lot of merit in this plan.
Oh, well, I hope it works for people, I really do. Candice, you've been looking at the terrible tragedy of what happened with the OceanGate Titan submersible.
Yes, we're all talking about this. There's a story in the Times which I think is absolutely fascinating and sort of illuminates what went wrong in this tragedy. And it was a colleague in the submersible industry had told Stockton Rush, the chief executive of OceanGate, that basically they were cutting corners when it came to safety. And I just think that this is such a powerful quote from him. He said, "There's a line where self-confidence crosses into arrogance, and Stockton Rush crossed it. He ran a toxic safety culture where if a concern was raised, he would get rid of the person raising it."
Wow.
So there were a lot of people saying, you need to submit your ship to basically some sort of external validation. We need to see if this thing is seaworthy.
Wow.
And he said no, because regulation is preventing experimentation in the industry. Fine, if you're just the one bearing the risk, but I don't think a 19-year-old can assess that risk properly.
And interesting, Anne, when we were speaking with Gareth Russell earlier, an expert on the Titanic, and he was saying that the company, the latest line is they've gone into liquidation. So knowing that there's going to be a whole raft of lawsuits and litigations against them, they've basically gone into receivership, so that can't happen. So many questions got to be asked about what seems now like the dodgy dealings of this company.
Yeah, but it seemed as though an awful lot of people were trying to warn everybody about this, but there was no industry watchdog or anything like that that took any action.
I know, and you need that. I mean, the aviation industry is as safe as it is because of all the protocols that are in place. I mean, pilots have to follow a huge checklist before they even take off. And I was reminded of the Challenger disaster when they investigated that and what went wrong, and it was the same. They completely underestimated the risk and apparently didn't listen to various engineers who were saying that it's not safe.
It happened throughout the space programme. Various times they were found to be cutting corners. And so they had to stop everything and then review it and then go ahead.
Yes.
It happened with Apollo 1. I mean, there again, I was confounded when we were talking about the possibility of this submersible maybe on the surface bobbing around in the ocean and that they were looking for it in that case. But still there was an oxygen problem because they couldn't open the hatch from the inside. It could only be opened from the outside. And how crazy is that? Everybody knows the lesson of Apollo 1 because the astronauts couldn't do the same thing. The hatch couldn't be opened from the inside, so when fire broke out, they couldn't get out themselves, and so they rebuilt the space capsule to have openable from the inside as well.
I mean, there's always a balance to be struck, isn't there, between innovation and regulation, especially when it's something as dangerous as this. And it's tragic, I guess, that it will have taken the deaths of these people to actually, make sure that there is proper regulation in place, despite what Boris Johnson says in his column that we spoke about. He's talking about no regulation.
Disagreed with it so much. I felt he missed the point completely.
OK, we'll need to speed ahead to this one that I find fascinating, Kevin, about British Gas offering us half-price electricity on Sundays.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing thing. I hadn't heard about this at all until I read it in The Guardian this morning. And, I mean, if you think about it, Sunday is the day probably when we use energy the most because everyone's at home, you might be cooking a roast, catching up in the housework, all your washing. So basically, British Gas are saying, right, between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. on a Sunday until the 24th of September, we're only going to charge half price. Now, in order to get your money's worth out of this, now, potentially it could save you 30 quid over the next 14 Sundays, but you would have to really go for it in terms of use your electric oven for 2 hours, a full hour using an electric hob, a vacuum cleaner, a washing machine and a tumble dryer.
You'd have to do everything on a Sunday.
10 cups of tea or coffee and play video games for 2 hours. So really go for it in that 5 hour window.
Absolutely.
A massive, so much for it being
you could do the week's cooking on a Sunday.
Day of rest.
Yeah.
It's a flurry of activity for 5 hours to make your...
Another thing, Kev, that I see as a problem coming down the horizon is this is going to be 11 till 4 o'clock when everyone argues about who does the housework. Oh, thanks a lot, British Gas.
Absolutely.
I'm being nagged into doing the roast,
and then the grid goes down because everybody's using electricity at the same time.
We have a power cut and we all fall out about that as well.
Do you have to be with British Gas? Can you be with any other energy company?
No, it's a British Gas. It's offering its customers only. So half price electricity every Sunday this summer.
Sounds like a cynical marketing ploy.
No, but it's the future now where we have this very
It's worked.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for that. We'll see you again in an hour's time. Right now, we're moving on to Glasgow.
Yeah, Glastonbury Festival 2023 continues into its second full day of music, headlined later on this evening by rock legends Guns N' Roses.
Oh, go for it. As the sun beats down on the whole of the UK, let's cross now to our showbiz reporter, Stephanie Tetchy, who is at the festival, and there's her tent behind her. Morning, Stephanie. Hi. How did last night go for you? Did you get any sleep?
Good morning, Martin and Anne. Yes, I did get some sleep yesterday, better than the first night, because the first night it was like raining galore, but second night it was just hot and sticky in my tent. So all these different weather conditions, it's quite brutal sometimes when you're camping out in a tent, but it's been lovely so far.
What's the gossip today then?
Well, all roads lead to the Guns N' Roses, who will be headlining at the Pyramid Stage tonight. It's the first time they've actually played at Glastonbury, and they've gone straight to the top. So I can imagine later on tonight we're going to be hearing some real big bangers, including Sweet Child of Mine.
There'll be lots of people of a certain vintage singing along to that, no doubt, after a couple of sherbets, Steph. What about last night's entertainment? Because the Foo Fighters did a mystery gig. They went down very well, but the Arctic Monkeys, apparently, didn't go down quite so well with the crowd. What happened?
So, Arctic Monkeys, there was this all big fuss whether they were going to perform or not because the lead singer, Alex Turner, had laryngitis and he had to pull out of a gig in Dublin earlier this week. But he managed to come for the performance. But fans weren't impressed because they slowed down a lot of their big tracks like Are You Mine, Morty Bum, and a lot of fans were just left unimpressed. A lot of people were saying, actually, Foo Fighters should have been the headlining set yesterday. All week long in Glastonbury, there's been this big buzz of who are the Churn-Ups. Every year in Glastonbury they do a secret headlining slot, and luckily it went to the Foo Fighters, and this was their first performance since they lost their drummer Taylor Hawkins, and it was quite an incredible performance, quite emotional and quite poignant because Taylor Hawkins is someone who's always come to Glastonbury, so for them to miss their drummer, it didn't go unnoticed.
Yeah, but so what are you doing today? What will you do now for the rest of the day before the concerts get going?
Okay, what I do is I have to queue up for a shower, but luckily I've already had the shower ready, but then it's going for breakfast. I want to go get all bejazzled up, get some diamonds on me, so I'm going to get fully like a little makeover and stuff. But the thing about Glastonbury is you have to map out your day because there's so many different stages, and walking to each stage is about half an hour, 45 minutes. So by the time you look, the day's already begun and you're already moving from set to set.
Is it true, Steph, that a certain Holly Willoughby arrived by helicopter? Using that common touch again.
Yes, you know what? A little birdie does tell me that the celebrities have been coming in via helicopter and landing to avoid all the queues. And so many people make grand entrances into Glastonbury. And Holly came by helicopter, which is quite surprising. I'm sure she wants to ignore many of the fans that will probably have a lot of questions for her about the whole Philip Schofield drama.
Yeah, exactly. It's the way to do it, isn't it? So, Stephanie, have a wonderful day.
Yes.
And we'll join you again tomorrow, I imagine, won't we? Because it's obviously going on for another few days yet.
Yes, it is. It is. So there's much to come, including Elton John's headlining set, his final big hurrah for his music career tomorrow night.
That'll be something you'll always treasure, I think, having been there for that. Have a good day.
Super. Did you notice? You notice how Steph is literally the only person awake at 7:53 in the morning.
Very noticeable.
Everybody
else is out for it, yeah. There are lots of funny pictures, actually, in the newspapers today of people who just found the heat too much to even go to one of the concerts, and they were just sort of lying out in their tent like that. Yeah. Oh, it's Armed Forces Day, of course, today, and that's something we have been celebrating throughout the programme and will continue to. And as I've said before, if you have your own way of marking Armed Forces Day today, if you've got something locally happening, let us know where it is and we'll give you a shout out. But the headquarters of today is in Falmouth, and we'll be live from Falmouth at 11 o'clock. So if you want to watch anything to do with the fly past and the marching and all the rest of it, stick with us here at GB News. You are watching Breakfast on GB News with Anne and Martin. You'll of course want to know how the weather's going to be today.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It is set to be quite a humid weekend for all of us as we feed in some very mild, if not hot, air from the southwest. We do have high pressure in charge across southeastern areas, helping it to keep fairly dry and settled. But further towards the north and west, frontal features pushing their way through will bring outbreaks of rain to parts of Scotland, gradually moving up towards the Highlands and the Northern Isles as well. Elsewhere, some of the drizzle across parts of Cumbria into the Lake District will fizzle its way out. Whilst it has been quite a cloudy start for the vast majority, it will break up as we head into the afternoon, allowing for some brighter, sunnier spells to develop. In that sunshine, climbing to highs of the mid-20s for Northern Ireland, central Scotland, but close towards 30 degrees Celsius in some southeastern areas. So really quite hot, and do remember that UV levels will be very high. There will be some late evening sunshine as well as the cloud continues to break up and generally staying dry for the vast majority of us overnight with some clear intervals. It is, though, with those southerly winds, going to be another humid and muggy night for the vast majority of us. Again, towns and cities holding up around 17, maybe 18 degrees Celsius in a few spots as well. So it could be quite uncomfortable for sleeping tonight. Then first thing into Sunday, it's watching this feature as it pushes into parts of Northern Ireland, could provide some very heavy rainfall and then push into northwest Scotland, and then later on we'll be migrating towards England, Wales, with some thunderstorms developing ahead of that across parts of Yorkshire down into Lincolnshire. Torrential downpours are possible with some surface water and localised flooding issues. Temperatures again on the hot side, climbing towards 31 degrees Celsius in the south, but further towards the west we are starting to feed in some slightly fresher air, and that's the theme as we head into the new working week. Generally those temperatures turning less hot than we have seen them, but rather unsettled. Bye-bye.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
And a very good morning to you. It is already 8 o'clock, would you believe?
Yeah, it is. So we've got lots more coming this morning, of course. Today, Happy Armed Forces Day. Celebrations take place around the UK, paying tribute to the men and women serving our country.
Banks have pledged more protection for homeowners as mortgage rates soar after the Bank of England increased its interest rates to 5%. But are they doing enough to help us?
And Guns N' Roses are set to headline the second full day of Glastonbury later on today. We'll be live from the festival with all the latest.
And of course, always, we'll bring you the latest weather.
It's a hot and humid weekend to come for many of us. Join me later for the full GB News weather forecast.
For many, it's going to be a scorcher. Good morning, I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Dordney in for Stephen Dixon, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, as we've been saying all morning, it's lovely to start the programme with good news. And at the top of every hour, we're going to be talking about Armed Forces Day. It's today. And it's going to be a smashing day by the look of it. Cornwall is actually going to host the national celebrations for Armed Forces Day for the first time.
Yeah, a series of events will be held across the country, with the main displays centred around Falmouth.
Over 1,000 service personnel and bands will parade through the town centre in the largest and longest military parade ever held in the UK.
Onlookers will then be treated to another fly past from the Red Arrows, a parachute drop by the RAF and a music concert in the evening.
And you'll be able to watch it all if you stick with GB News, because from 11 o'clock we're going to be live in Falmouth, and then throughout the rest of the morning we'll be bringing you all the highlights. At 10:30 I think we're crossing to Manchester as well to see what they're doing up there. But if you've got anything happening for Armed Forces Day where you live, let us know and we'll give you a shout out about it.
Yeah, and our southwest of England reporter Jeff Moody looks ahead to a day of military might and celebration.
They say the people of Cornwall will never have seen anything like this. Marching bands, military inspections, flypasts, the might of the British Armed Forces on full display. 100,000 people are expected to descend on Falmouth today. The aim? To show support for the men and women who make up the armed forces, from currently serving troops to service families, veterans and cadets. There's a military parade at 11 o'clock. Over 1,000 service personnel, marching bands galore. Then in the afternoon, all eyes turn to the sky. Red Arrows, Navy Merlin helicopters, Spitfires, and wrapping up with a prom-style concert in the evening. It's the 15th Armed Forces Day. Cornwall Council says it's honoured to have won the bid to host this year's festivities. It's costing Cornish taxpayers £350,000, some saying it's inappropriate given the cost of living crisis, biting particularly hard in the Duchy. But it's expected to bring in around £7 million in revenue. Organisers say the event will be a chance to take photos, to make memories, and above all, to celebrate peace. A peace that's been hard fought for, hard won. A peace that's lasted 80 years. Jeff Moody, GB News.
It should be a fabulous day, and I don't know whether you can ever argue the finance on this one and say, you know, I know the cost of living crisis is facing everybody, but it's worth celebrating our armed forces, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and we've been getting so many comments all morning about this, so many wonderful stories you're sharing with us about your own military history and your past and how it made you as a person. What do we have?
Well, Carol said, by the way, Newport and Caerphilly in Wales are also holding celebrations. My husband served for 37 years and we look forward to meeting old friends today. It's a time for remembering and catching up, not forgetting the wives who supported them and other partners.
Good point. And Heather says, my grandson was at college during lockdown and decided he would like to be an electrician one day. I said to him, why not join the army instead? He joined up, did the initial basic training, which he passed, and now he's with the Royal Electrical and Mechanical engineers, the REME. He is absolutely loving it.
REME, they call it in the business, don't they? REME. William says, my husband Paddy joined the Royal Navy at the age of 15 and a half and served for 25 years. He is so proud of serving our country. You can take the man out of the services, but you'll never take the services out of the man.
Yeah, and one thing we're talking about a lot this morning, Anne, was the age of signing up. The government want to look into changing that from currently 16 to 18. Here's somebody who disagrees with that. Andy. I joined the RAF Boy Veterans Scheme at 16. I've been brought up in an institution and would have been homeless without it. It made me as a man. It set me up for my life, and it's been a total asset later in my life.
Yeah, a lot of people have been getting in touch saying they joined up 15 and a half, 16, and it gave them a home, which maybe they hadn't had before. So, I mean, there are so many sides to it, aren't there? It's a day to be proud and not be ashamed of being proud, I reckon.
100%. OK, well, joining us this morning is the Head of Clinical and Medical Services at Help for Heroes, Carol Betteridge. Carol, a very happy Armed Forces Day to you. What do you have planned for today? And tell us about Help for Heroes and how they're getting involved.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me come on today. And the first thing I want to do is join you and thank all the Armed Forces community, those that are serving, the veterans and their families, of course, as you've mentioned. Today, I think it's about celebrating, but also remembering. So one of the things that's happened over the last few years is there's 1 million less people donating to military charities to support our veterans. So it's also an opportunity to remind people that although we might not be in a major conflict, our armed forces personnel are as busy as ever. And some of them, unfortunately, leave with a lifelong injury or illness. And we want to be there to support them because they themselves are still fighting that personal battle.
I think you're doing a grand job, though, because most people have heard of Help for Heroes now. But, yeah, what is the sort of everyday business of your life?
Well, I think it's about making sure that our veterans and the armed forces personnel remain in the headlines to make sure that we can get those donations coming in, because what we want to do is help people manage their physical and their psychological injuries. We can help with housing adaptations, counselling, clinical equipment, help them themselves through self-help guides, manage that condition themselves, get them back into their community, make them feel part of that community again, and really live well after service. It's all those things that we want to do for our veterans and their families, because they absolutely deserve it. There's no doubt about that.
And one of the things, Carol, about servicemen and women, they often exit the services at quite a young age, and they have a long time ahead of them in terms of their career. What careers do you think service people are especially cut out to do? I, for one, would like to see more veterans being involved in the police force, and instead we seem to rely on graduates for that.
I mean, I think we forget that the armed forces personnel have amazing transferable skills into civilian life. You know, they do lots of man management. They do lots of technical things like Anna said about the REME, and those things are really transferable into civilian life. And, you know, they are young, so they've got a life ahead of them. So we want to make sure that they're fit and well enough to do that and really contribute again to society, because that's what we all want to do.
And mental health problems, we know, were a great sort of secret for a long, long time. We're talking much more about it now. But that must be another way that you're helping people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we see is that even when armed forces personnel leave, sometimes it can take 3, 4, 5, up to 10 years before they recognise that perhaps they've got some sort of issue. You know, they're so used to managing. They're a really difficult cohort to reach, to get them to ask for help. So it's really important that if any veteran out there or their families feel that they are suffering a psychological injury or a mental health illness, then please come forward and ask for help. Talk to somebody at least, and, you know, go onto our website. We've got so much to offer, and we want to be there for them for the rest of their lives.
And in terms of the personal benefits of former servicemen and women turning up to events like today, I mean, I know good friends of mine, old veterans, they love nothing more than getting together with the old crew, telling a few perhaps inappropriate jokes. That kindred spirit of getting back together, that barracks mentality is a key part of the life during and after service, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I mean, that's a huge part of our work is, as I said, getting veterans to re-engage with their community. You know, they've got so much to offer. They love to share their stories, talk to young people, because we need to remind the younger generation of the sacrifice that people have made. And it's a great opportunity to do that, but also to celebrate, you know. As you say, it's fantastic news that today the country is celebrating our armed forces community. So we must remember that and encourage everybody to get out there and do that.
Absolutely. Get out there and celebrate. Carol, you're doing a grand job. Thank you so much for all you do.
Yeah, really fabulous.
John has got in touch. Morning, John says, I joined the RAF as a boy entrant, aged 15, in 1964. I served for 12 years. We had our 50-year reunion in Hereford, where we did our training, and we have met up every year since. Nothing can compare with that first reunion, meeting up with comrades after years, young boys then, and now gentlemen in their 70s, with so much to talk about. Sadly, since that first reunion, our numbers are dwindling, but we will always honour and remember them. That's lovely. Thank you.
I've got something in my eye.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for that.
OK, so happy Armed Forces Day. If you've got anything special happening as an event to mark this in your area, then do get in touch and we'll give you a shout out. It's, as ever, GB News, GB Views at gbnews.com.
That's right, you got it.
It's the first time I've got that wrong in about a year and a half.
It must be sitting next to me.
Yeah, probably.
Something that's catchy. OK, let's bring you up to date now with the other stories of the day. Vladimir Putin is addressing Russia after a set of skirmishes with the Wagner Group mercenaries. Wagner leader Prigozhin called for a rebellion against the army, although he denied that he was attempting a coup. The Russian president has described it as a knife in the back of our people.
Meanwhile, the First Minister of Scotland says independence for the region could bring a transformational change. It's not exactly a new thing to say, is it? Speaking in Dundee later, he's going to tell the SNP leaving the UK would give Scotland more power to build a better country. He'll also tell the convention the Westminster economic model is causing misery to Scotland.
And a water company has blamed more people working from home after the COVID pandemic for a new hosepipe ban. South East Water will impose the first hosepipe ban of the summer from Monday, affecting households across Kent and Sussex. The company's chief executive also blamed low rainfall, wow, amazing, as well as a recent spell of hot weather, leading to a spike in demand for drinking water.
How selfish of us wanting to drink water.
Yeah, stop. Think of the climate. Think of the emergency. You just go thirsty.
Think of the massive profits that the water companies still make, and yet they blame us and low rainfall.
But it's a bit of a cheat.
For their shortcomings.
They're blaming people for working from home, watering their garden, when you could just, I don't know, build a new reservoir or repair some damaged sewage and pipes. Just a thought. Anyway, let's move on.
Yes, well, the banks have pledged more protection for homeowners as mortgage rates soar after the Bank of England increased interest rates to 5%.
Yeah, banks and building societies will offer more flexibility, allowing borrowers to temporarily change to their mortgage terms for up to 6 months if they're struggling to afford the new rates.
So, following yesterday's meeting with the UK's leading banks, Jeremy Hunt stressed that the 6-month flexibility on switching terms would not affect credit scores as it might have done previously.
But is this enough, or could the government be doing even more to help those struggling? Well, joining us now to discuss it is Conservative Home columnist and, of course, GB News presenter, megastar Emily Carver. Emily, so
megastar?
Yeah, you certainly are now. So, on the face of it, good news.
Yeah, it's not bad news. I mean, the government is keen to show that they are doing as much as possible to help people struggling with rising interest rates, mortgage holders in particular, without actually intervening and paying the difference for all of us. Because that's what some politicians and some commentators were calling for. the government, you know, you've done it before with energy price guarantee, you've done it before with the furlough scheme, with all of these subsidies, handouts, essentially, on a vast, vast scale. Why can't you do it with mortgages? But no, they've said, Jeremy Hunt met with mortgage lenders, said, what can you do here? Can you be a bit more flexible? Can you let people move onto interest only? Can you make sure that when they're discussing these things with you, that it doesn't affect their credit rating going forward? Basically making it a little bit easier for people to be flexible with their mortgages. Would the banks have done it anyway? Possibly, but it's a good look for the government to be doing this. Interestingly, it's very, very similar to what the Labour Party have been saying, or the Labour Party is saying something very, very similar to what the government is saying. No, we can't pay your mortgage for you, but we will try and encourage the banks to be a bit more flexible.
It's worth saying at this point, it's only Barclays and HSBC that are doing it. The rest are expected to follow suit. But it is a good idea. Surely you effectively get a 6-month holiday. So rather than paying thousands on repayment, you're paying just the base rate of 5%. For a lot of people, that can be £1,000 or more per month. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. It means that you don't pay your debt off, so effectively you're just prolonging the term of your mortgage. But nevertheless, in the short term, this is a boon.
Well, the whole point of interest rate rises is that they hurt a little bit. That they give us less spending power, and that's supposed to reduce inflation. I'm slightly sceptical about whether it's working because of the type of inflation we have. I'm not sure we have the traditional inflation, which can just be brought down by taking some money out of the economy, but we shall see. That's what the Bank of England are hoping now, after they failed to act quick enough. What's very interesting in the politics at the moment, I don't know if you've seen a recent poll, but it's quite shocking, perhaps. Ipsos. Net satisfaction for Rishi Sunak, -68. Liz Truss, just before her resignation, -69. So it really is. Rishi Sunak is deeply unpopular at the moment, and it's hardly surprising because of the inflation. Do people believe that Keir Starmer and the rest of the shadow cabinet could be doing a better job? Increasingly so. So it is very difficult for Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt. I think that the government appears to be running out of steam. There are no big ideas. Where are the supply-side reforms to try and bring down the cost of living? You know, why are we only talking about interest rates? Rishi Sunak says he wants to halve inflation. Well, what is he doing to try and bring down energy costs, for example?
Yeah, it's not a very impressive performance, really, from anybody, is it?
No. I think people are a bit confused about what to do, which path to take, and that's not what we really expect from, people in power.
Well,
perhaps it is.
Well, actually, GB News was in Barnsley on Thursday night, and there were 100 people in a room there. And
apparently it was barnstorming.
It was barnstorming, well done. And Michelle Dewberry asked the crowd, would you vote for the Conservatives or would you vote for the Labour Party? Not a single person put their hand up, as in they wouldn't vote for either of those two parties. And these are former Tory voters, Red Wallers, former Labour voters. The none of the above parties looking increasingly like the option they would go for. They're dissatisfied with a lot of them.
Well, imagine if we had a different electoral system.
Yeah.
Then it would be out with Labour, out with the Conservatives, and something fresh.
What would we have
that's not how it works.
Yeah.
So it will be one or the other.
Yeah.
At that Barnsley thing, did they ask about Boris's popularity at all?
Yeah, they felt that he completely squandered Brexit. This is 69% Brexit land.
Crumbs.
And they just thought on fishing, Northern Ireland, the protocol, the level playing field, taxation, they thought he'd blown it.
Gosh. So where are we meant to look for leadership at the moment? I mean, I asked
the Daily Mail.
Yeah, I asked about Boris, yes, because his second column was out today. You'll remember his first column last week was a bit of a damp squib because we were expecting some barnstorming from him, and we didn't get it. All we got was this soliloquy about how difficult it is to lose weight.
Yeah.
Today, we've just got exactly the same thing, very wordy. We thought he was just sort of typing extra words to make up the word count so he could earn his money. But today he's just talking about the Titanic tragedy and actually, frankly, saying nothing new at all. What do you make of...
May I just say that Douglas Murray has written a similar column for The Sun, and it reads much more... much better.
Yeah.
There were a lot of words, very long. I didn't get to the end, I must admit.
Yeah.
But he's making the point that, some lefties are sneering about the Titanic, saying that, these rich people should never have done this. This is a sign that, they're not taxed enough, etc., etc. But it's a bit irrelevant, really. We want to know, what he thinks about the political situation. He's a former Prime Minister.
What do you think's going on? I mean, why isn't the Daily Mail thumping on the table and saying, we want something meaty out of you, Boris?
He's mocking us all.
Yeah.
He's trolling us.
Yeah,
and he can.
I think there'll be a lot of head scratching going on because they've got the former Prime Minister, the man of the moment, and he's coming out with absolute flannel.
I mean, the weight loss jab.
Yeah, absolute flannel.
That didn't work for him.
That's right, yeah, how you raided the fridge.
Comedic, at least.
There we go, there we go. If you can figure it out, then get in touch, because we can't make anything of it. It's GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Thank you, Emily Carver. OK, up next, we'll be following the sports highlights with Aidan McGee. You're with Breakfast on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss? Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome back. It's 8:23. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Stephen. I was thinking, I mustn't say Stephen, and I said it. Martin. Martin's in for Stephen
I understand
today.
you're missing Stephen very much. So am I. But I'm no Stephen. I am a Martin.
Yeah, you are. Welcome, anyway. And do remember to get in touch with us about absolutely anything you want to talk to us about today. It's, as usual, gbviews at gbnews.com.
Now, Canadian officials are launching an investigation into the loss of the Ocean Gate sub. A team of investigators are now travelling to St John's in Newfoundland to gather information.
The US Coast Guard have said that debris was consistent with a catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber and, sadly, that the bodies may never be recovered.
Well, earlier on today, we spoke to historian Gareth Russell, author of The Ship of Dreams, and asked him why we're all still so mesmerised by the sinking of the Titanic.
Absolutely, it is an incredible story. Sometimes people ask why it is more famous than other shipwrecks, even of the same time, thinking of the Lusitania that was torpedoed by the Germans in 1915. I think part of it is the Titanic took 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. And so people on board had time to figure out they were in trouble, to react in certain ways, and it becomes a kind of morality play on how you would respond to impending death. And also, of course, the hubris of it being the greatest technological achievement of its era and still being destroyed by nature. And it's interesting, as you say, that kind of fascination that brought the people on the Titan into the ocean, because I think there is an element of which it's almost, for some people, not a pilgrimage, but there's a cachet in saying you saw it. So it has become such a fixture in pop culture because of movies and things like that, that I think some people have an added fascination in wanting to say that they physically saw it through the porthole of the submarine.
Well, you did, didn't you? You wanted to go and see it.
I was offered. I didn't want to. I didn't. To be clear, I didn't get far enough into really investigating the submarine. It's now become clear that another of my colleagues did and had serious safety concerns about it, as we're hearing from quite a few people. It was very early on in production meetings, and I sort of caught from just the tone that I said, sorry, can I just check, do you expect me to get in the submarine? Is that what we're discussing? And I said no, simply because I don't think it would be a particularly pleasant journey. I don't think it's a wise journey. And also, I don't love enclosed spaces. It is a very small space for quite a length of time. And also, without sounding too reductive, it's a pretty small window. It's very limited visibility. And I thought, I'm actually not sure that I will see anything really through this window that I wouldn't see perhaps in better definition on the cameras sent back up to the footage sent back up to the surface.
And Gareth, serious questions are now being asked about the suitability of the craft, its seaworthiness, full stop, seem to be corners cut in its manufacture. Do you think these kind of expeditions should carry on, or should we pause and have a proper safety overview so we avoid any further disasters in the future?
Great question. I mean, we've just found out this morning that OceanGate have closed their doors, the business that ran this, and there's speculation in the US press that they have done this to avoid what will presumably be an avalanche of litigation. I don't think that's speaking out of turn there. I think there's going to be some serious questions, and that those questions will take on a legal hue. I personally am not convinced that there is any more archaeological, for want of a better word, justification for these trips. I should say one of the gentlemen who died in the Titan, Paul Henri Nochelet, is contributed hugely to the development of submarines and deep sea dives. And actually, not a lot of people know this, the Titanic was discovered in a Cold War mission. It was the sort of a perfect cover story. The US Navy, were looking for 2 missing nuclear submarines. And that was part of how it was discovered. So those Titanic dives have really contributed over the years to our knowledge of how to dive to the deep. And it's also contributed to the field of microbiology as well. But my argument would be it's done that. It has served its purpose. And certainly if you look at the OceanGate submarine, it wasn't exactly at the forefront of nautical technology, to put it mildly. So I do think the wisest thing to do by a long shot is to stop these, at least for a while. And certainly I personally don't think there should ever really have been commercialized dives to it. I think it mixes profit with safety in a way that quite clearly corners were cut. It's not in anyone's best interests, I think.
Fascinating man, fascinating book he's written too, all about the Titanic. But very interesting hearing him say that the latest news angle that he's heard is that Ocean View have shut their doors. They will be expecting real problems, I think. And apparently, because Ocean View was sailing under a Canadian flag, it's the Canadian Coast Guard who has now said that they have the right to investigate fully what happened.
Yeah, and I think dissolving the company like that will come across, I think, as the final insult, because if there were lawsuits, litigations coming through, now the company effectively no longer exists, that would be an opportunity denied those.
Well, I imagine their lawyers have advised them to do that at the moment.
Yeah.
Gary has got in touch. Hi, Gary, says, I had sympathy up to when they needed to be rescued, but not now, we know the result. To sign a paper that says possibility of death and pay something like $200,000 for glory and fame whilst people struggle to put food on the family table, that's the difference. With that money, they could have sent down an unmanned underwater vehicle and worn virtual reality glasses or built a huge cinema screen in a theatre.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Boris Johnson's talking about in his column in the Daily Mail today. He's saying, he's saying that they are true explorers, and he doesn't agree with that point. This is really interesting from Phil. Why don't Google put the Titanic on their website, the same as they put everywhere on their Street View? Anyone could then fly around it in a virtual submersible. So go down,
same thing, using virtual.
So you can go along with it. It's a great idea.
Yeah, Graham says the people weren't all explorers. The 19-year-old and his father were tourists. And the purpose of this sub-design was for tourism. The obvious implication is that safety might have been better if this hadn't had anything to do with tourism. It makes me so sick to hear that the young lad didn't really want to do the trip and was doing it to please his father on Father's Day.
Yeah, and John says here, why not consider that Everest is similar to the Titanic site, a massive graveyard and dangerous? Who would suggest no one is allowed to visit and attempt to climb the peak? So he's basically saying people still go for Everest, but not underwater.
But people do criticise the tourism that is now involved, in that you can pay a lot of money to very experienced climbers to take you up there. I mean, there is still the danger you'll lose your life, and that presumably you sign waivers in a very similar thing. And the other thing that's happening on Everest, it's being littered, absolutely littered with oxygen canisters, with all of the waste and debris. Yeah, that's right, poo bags, they say. And of course, many, many dead bodies that it's too dangerous to recover.
And then there's a huge conversation to be had about who foots the bill of the search and rescue attempts, because if taxpayers are picking up the bill for private individuals, well, that's a whole can of worms.
But can you stop the spirit of exploration and people wanting to just go that extra mile, literally? Very difficult to know.
Well, let us know your views. GBviews at gbnews.com on that and all the other topics. Coming up shortly.
Yeah, exactly. Coming up shortly, we've got the newspapers, so stick with us. You're watching Breakfast here on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin. And it's time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning is writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth, alongside political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Good morning to both of you. One final time with emotion. Kev, let's kick off with you. A really interesting story here from The Telegraph. Because of surging mortgage rates, there's a boom in people taking in lodgers.
Yeah, my eye was drawn to this story by a great picture of Rigsby from Rise and Damp, who was obviously a famous...
He's the ultimate lodger, wasn't he?
Ultimate, yeah. Well, he had the lodgers, and he was a terrible sort of slum landlord. But yeah, because of, as we've been discussing all morning, rising interest rates, rising mortgage costs, on top of all the other cost of living problems that people are having at the moment, experts are predicting that folk will start taking in lodgers as a way of helping to bring down their own personal costs. You know, you charge a room, and
it's a traditional British way of helping out.
Absolutely, think of Eddie Yates in Coronation Street. One for the kids there. But yeah, and I didn't realise this, that the government has a thing called a rent a room scheme, whereby if you take in a lodger, you can earn up to £7,500 a year tax-free as an encouragement to do it.
Gosh, that's worth knowing.
Yeah,
isn't it?
now it has to be fully furnished accommodation, so you know you need to obviously be pucker. But yeah, it's something I think that at the moment people are just looking for any way to bring their own costs down, getting a bit of extra income. And as you say, it's something that maybe...
Do you know, that's very interesting, isn't it? Because we have a homelessness problem we're going to be talking about later. But, and we talk about the problem with young people sofa surfing and everything.
Yeah.
If there were a properly organised scheme, and clearly there are the bones of it there, to actually get back to old-fashioned Britishness and take in a lodger, maybe it would work.
And they're mentioning as well that a lot of people turned their spare room into an office, a home office during the pandemic, and having to work from home. Obviously, people are back in the office, most of them anyway, these days, so spare room's going free. Why not turn it into a bedroom to take in lodging? Now, it's not for everyone. Not everyone probably likes the idea of a stranger coming to live in their home. But if you're up for it and you're willing to take someone in...
Well, and if you applied for this government scheme as well, which would make sense, because then you're getting a double income in a way, then hopefully there's some sort of regulation.
Absolutely, yeah.
And somebody keeping an eye on the whole thing.
Yes, indeed. You need there's certain standards, obviously, that you have to meet, so you're not just...
I think that's really interesting.
Very interesting. Very good. Candice, we were talking earlier about Boris Johnson, and his first column was about the weight loss jab. And now, apparently, what a great surprise, there's a massive shortage of those jabs.
Yeah, so this is a story in The Independent on the front page. It's about a shortage of the weight loss drug Ozempic. So it's usually only prescribed for people who have type 2 diabetes, but GPs are able to prescribe it off-label at their discretion, and a lot of people who don't have type 2 diabetes are using it for cosmetic reasons because they just want to lose weight. And because of this huge demand, there are shortages now, and people with type 2 diabetes can't get it. So now they're saying OK, maybe you need to restrict the use of it. It can't just be for cosmetic things. It has to be if you have a genuine health concern. And I have heard longevity experts say that you shouldn't really use these drugs unless you really need to. I mean, you should be using exercise, diet management, that type of thing to lose weight. But I feel like that's the culture we live in now. So many things that maybe people only would have used if they had a strict health concern, they now use for cosmetic reasons.
It's interesting because, like, Elon Musk started this trend, didn't he, in terms of, like, popularising it. Jeremy Clarkson also partook. And you can go online to an online pharmacist, and within moments you can lie about your body weight, you can lie about your body mass index, you can lie about your height, and you can get this stuff posted to you without any real checks at all.
What I would say on that is, because I've read a lot about it, and I've got a friend who was on it for a while, and even Boris Johnson said in his column, it only seems to work for a while, and then if you haven't changed your lifestyle, really, you can put the weight back on again. And I point you towards Jeremy Clarkson and Elon Musk and others. They're not exactly slender, are they?
Boris Johnson should ask for his money back.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you have to think about that too, whether they actually work they do work for diabetes, trying to prevent and help diabetes type 2. But if you're just doing it to try and lose weight, mind you, that's a good idea as well, to prevent you getting diabetes type 2. But it may not work for you long term, perhaps without doctors, you know, oversee or something, I don't know. It's clearly not. Everybody's calling it a wonder drug, and it clearly isn't.
Yes, and there was a woman writing in the Mail 2 weeks ago who said she actually became quite depressed using it because she likes eating. Eating's great pleasure for her, and she'd look at food and feel nothing. And that actually made her quite unhappy.
Yeah, the real answer is it's not more jabs, it's less baps.
Yeah.
Just eat less. Just eat less.
Put the fork down.
Yeah. But if it was that simple as just eat less, we wouldn't have a problem, would we? That's the trouble. It ain't easy, and everybody's looking for help, I suppose.
So, Kev, this brings us neatly onto your story. In the Times, cut prices, supermarkets told amid claims of profiteering.
Well, yeah, well, so it's interesting, isn't it? You know, we spoke earlier on about Jeremy Hunt getting the heads of the banks in to tell them to help mortgage holders. And now the government is also looking to put pressure on supermarkets not to put up prices as well, which is unusual for a Conservative government, really, to be so interventionist, you might say. But politically, they realise that the cost of living crisis is the #1 issue for voters, the length and breadth of the country, and they need to be seen to be doing something. Now, there's a suspicion that inflation, one of the reasons inflation is going up is because supermarkets are profiteering. They're putting their prices up artificially to get their profit margins back up again. And now the flip side to that is the supermarkets say, no, that's not true. We price as competitively as possible. You would expect them to say that, obviously. But the government clearly are willing to intervene and are looking to talk to them and say, look, guys, keep these price rises to the absolute minimum because, well, inflation is...
It's not very Conservative, that, is it?
Well, no. So that's what I mean. I mean, it's just not at all. And it's the type of thing that maybe you expect maybe a Labour government to be much more interventionist, whereas the Conservatives are supposed to believe in the free market, but clearly they know that politically they need to be seen to be doing something.
I mean, this is straight out of the Corbynomics book, isn't it? I mean, this is big state socialism. It's governments meddling in private supply chains.
I know. As a lot of people have said, you know, what are the actual ideas driving this Conservative government? They're not in any way a recognisable Conservative government. But like Kevin says, the election's coming up and this is going to damage them badly. So they've got to do something about it. I mean,
the supermarkets have got to respond, though, haven't they? And will they?
Well, the thing is, though, if you go to the supermarket, and you do notice, when you go to Tesco, for instance, it's not a plug for Tesco, but you do see, you know, price match with Aldi. So they realise that they do have to compete with your Aldis and your Lidls, because they are...
And Aldi are doing advertising, which is really aggressive, saying this is 43p at Tesco, but go to Aldi and it's half the price.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
yes, so people,
amazingly aggressive.
Yeah, so maybe the answer is maybe people
that's
shop
free
around.
market for you.
But then you've got the same politicians getting rid of the bug-off deals, you know, buy one, get one free, so that they're kind of nanny-stating us into eating less, but actually it means less value and less choice for the consumer. I know nowadays you hardly get any offers.
I know.
Down the supermarket. I used to buy my food around what was on yellow ticket or what was on offer, but you hardly see any now.
I know. Actually, I wonder how we would have done without the likes of Aldi and Lidl. I mean, people probably would have been struggling a lot more now to buy food. So thank goodness there is that choice.
Yeah. So we talked about the homeless story. Prince William, Candice, in the Express, to carry on his mother's legacy of taking on homelessness?
Yes, so obviously he's inherited this huge estate now, the Duchy of Cornwall. So he's a big landowner. So what Prince William said is he wants to develop on that land to help solve homelessness. It's quite funny, though, you know, property rights are very important to me, but when it comes to these sort of like aristocratic landowners, I kind of turn into a frothing communist a little bit, especially when you realise there's just not enough house building anyway. House prices are so high, young people can't get on the property ladder. I think it's good that he's open to that idea, though, and that he does want to do more, and he recognises that, you know, just owning huge tracts of land that nobody lives on isn't good for anybody. So, you know, I'll give him that. I'll be charitable in that respect.
Well, I mean, the Prince Charles before him did some wonderful work with the Prince's Trust, which still continues. I mean, absolutely brilliant work, particularly for young people. And if Prince William is going to try and... He's thinking of his legacy as Prince of Wales, isn't he?
Yeah.
If he can actually do something about the homeless problem, he's looking particularly at young people, sofa surfers, like we were talking about earlier, people who at the moment have got no prospect of even a rented home, let alone getting on the property ladder, and just trying to give them somewhere to live that's decent. Very important.
But then a cynic, Kev, might say, well, you've got a castle or a palace or three going spare. You can put some homeless people in that.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's what he's doing.
And that argument has been made many times. I'm not sure they would probably go quite that far as to bring in a lodger, for instance, in Buckingham Palace, etc. But I think the other thing is, what you've got to take your hat off to is the Prince William and Kate's PR operation. It is absolutely fantastic. You only ever see positive headlines about things that they're doing, such as this, you know, positive, progressive project. And I think it jars slightly with the negative.
It makes a nice change, doesn't it? Yeah.
His brother and Meghan get. So
they're just sort of stalwartly getting on with the job in a way, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Very impressive.
Kev, superb, great news out there if it's heating up and you want to have a cold beer, because beer lovers have come to the rescue of the ailing hospitality business.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, as you're saying, this weekend is to be absolutely roasting hot, I think, across the whole country. And the Sun says that beer lovers have heroically downed an extra 21 million pints in the past 3 months.
Oh, you mean they just drunk more?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Compared to this time last year. So that's an industry and job saving 72,332 extra barrels of beer have been sunk, which apparently, according to the Sun, is saving the ailing hospitality business. Now, we know that pubs and restaurants suffered hugely as a result of the pandemic, and, you know, people are definitely going out less because the prices are very high. But, you know, that great British bulldog spirit, we're drinking for Britain.
Drinking for Britain, absolutely. Well, we've always been able to do that.
I love the idea of that you're a hero if you drink a load of beer when actually you're probably not. But it is good news, though, Candice, for, I mean, as Kev said, hospitality was absolutely hammered by lockdowns. Many pubs closed and never opened their doors again. I know a lot of landlords personally who went to the wire, got through their life savings. So on the one hand, it's a bit of fun, but on the other hand, hospitality is a big employer in Britain. It's an important story.
Yes, huge. I mean, travel and hospitality were absolutely decimated during COVID. I mean, I knew people who lost their companies that they'd spent years building up. It was really, really sad, and they've never recovered. And it's something we haven't really reckoned with. So yes, to see support for the industry in this way is very important. I think if you can help out your local pub, do it.
Superb.
Before we move on, we've got to cover this. A nap a day is good for your brain.
Yes.
It can keep memory loss at bay, and researchers found that regular nappers have bigger brains.
Yeah, well, those of us who do breakfast shows...
Well, absolutely. Naps are very important.
And get up with the lark. I mean, this is just brilliant news. So there's been a study that shows that people who have a short nap at least once a day, like you say, have bigger brains. It can stave off the risk of dementia. And just there are so many cognitive benefits. You're just a lot more alert, awake, aware. And it sort of goes against a lot of conventional wisdom, where you're seen as maybe a bit lazy if you take a nap. But actually, there's a huge amount of benefit to it. So maybe it's something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. No doubt after 21 million extra pints of beer, we all need a bit more of a nap. and why not? Doctor's orders, Candice Holdsworth and Kevin Scoville, you've been fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you for
very
joining
much.
us. It's been great fun. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it'll be a good day for a nap today because it's going to be really hot this afternoon. You may want to have a quick nap. This heat wave is coming this weekend, and we've been asking the question, are you staying hydrated? Very, very important to drink lots of water, apparently, even if you don't like it.
And unfortunately, I found out earlier, 21 million pints of beer don't count.
No, they won't.
But this comes as residents of Liverpool have been revealed as drinking the least amount of water, falling short of the recommended amount of 6 to 8 cups per day.
So if you're venturing out particularly, drink 6 or 8 cups now and get it over and done with. Our GB News reporter Jack Carson is out in the heat for us today in Cannon Hill Park in Birmingham. How is it looking? Well, it looks lovely at the moment. Is it heating up out there?
It is, right on cue actually. The sun has just come out, which is fantastic. But yeah, this is Cannon Hill Park. So acres and acres of green space. There's a lake behind me. I've actually seen some pedalo swans, which is very tempting because I don't think I've actually ever been on a pedalo swan. But yeah, in the hot weather, this place gets very, very busy as families come out for a picnic and to sunbathe. But of course, there are lots of things that you need to keep doing. Of course, hydrating is one of those things because in some parts of the country, it's going to be up to 32 degrees this weekend. That's more down in the southeast, in the areas of London, but there is a heat warning in place across the West Midlands, the East Midlands, much of the south of the country, because what we've got this weekend is a northwest southeast divide, where actually when you go north, they're looking likely to be showering patches as well as thunderstorms and possibly even hail in some parts of the north. So it's very contrasting weather around the country. But the chief meteorologist at the Met Office, Matthew Lenhart, says that there are going to be some impactful thunderstorms across the northern half of the UK on Sunday. But there is a balance. There's a balance of warnings all across the country. So it's making sure that people stay focused, check in on those maybe vulnerable people, because what you get in these summer months in this extreme heat is obviously still quite hot in the evenings, when usually it would cool down and you can get some, and you're not kind of feeling too hot and bothered. Of course, when it gets in the hotter months, you are still very hot in the evening. So a warning there from the UK Health Agency to just check on those older and vulnerable people. But of course, protecting yourself in the sun is also one of the big things this weekend. As here in the West Midlands, it's going to be around high 20s, 27, 28 degrees. And of course, protecting yourself is one of the main things, because melanoma is the 5th most common cancer in the UK, and of course that you increase your chances of that if you have sunburn. So something like this, a good sun cream, a 30 SPF minimum is what people around the country need to be wearing today if they are out in the sun. And of course, the experts all say as well, as you were mentioning, drinking plenty of water and also wearing sunglasses, whether you're wearing a cap, just to keep yourself shaded so you don't get heat stroke. Now, the experts do say that you shouldn't spend too long in direct sunlight, that if you are going to be out in the sun all day, you should find some shade, whether it's like I have right now under a tree, or just going maybe even back to the car. If you're in a park, go back to the car for a few minutes. If it's in the shade, can't just get yourself out of the sun for a bit so you don't get that heat stroke, and you can protect yourself and give yourself the best day in the sun, but also to make sure that you don't get too ill from it either.
OK, Jack, thanks very much indeed. Look after yourself today. It looks nice and peaceful and calm there at the moment, but people will be out lying in the sun. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to get in touch saying, nanny state, you're telling us, and you're holding up, SPF, whatever it's called, and bottles of water and things. We don't need telling, we're not children. But sometimes these things are worth just saying once more, just in case you remind somebody and save them from burning or whatever.
Yeah. And we've got a couple of views in. I'd like to read this. We were talking about slugs earlier on, because part of the problem, of course, when it gets hot and wet, looks like some of that weather might be coming up north.
It's basically him can't grow carrots.
Yeah, I can't grow carrots. I'm a pathetic vegetable grower. My dad was a master at this, so is my granddad. I've lost the gene, but I'm blaming slugs. Here's how you tackle them. Pauline, we use broken eggshells, as slugs don't like crawling over them. We have outside tomatoes and runner beans with no signs of slugs.
Yes, I've heard of the eggshell thing, but I thought you said you'd tried broken glass.
Yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work for me. And Meryl...
Somebody else said try wool.
Yeah, here, Meryl. Surround your plants with wool. The slugs do not cross it. They do not like the effect of the wool on their slime. I've cut up some old woolen hats in my garden and had no slugs, wool and eggs. There we go.
And it's a tip I'd say as well, having just torn up my astroturf and put down real grass. Cut it. They don't like crawling over astroturf. They won't do it.
Oh, OK. Oh, so you could surround...
You could surround it with a little border of green astroturf or something.
Live and learn. All the slug tips coming to you thick and fast on GB News this morning. Well, more to come in the show, including how the nation is celebrating Armed Forces Day today. But first, here's your weather with Jonathan Vautry.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It is set to be quite a humid weekend for all of us as we feed in some very mild, if not hot, air from the southwest. We do have high pressure in charge across southeastern areas, helping it to keep fairly dry and settled. But further towards the north and west, frontal features pushing their way through will bring outbreaks of rain to parts of Scotland, gradually moving up towards the Highlands and the Northern Isles as well. Elsewhere, some of the drizzle across parts of Cumbria into the Lake District will fizzle its way out. Whilst it has been quite a cloudy start for the vast majority, it will break up as we head into the afternoon, allowing for some brighter, sunnier spells to develop. In that sunshine, climbing to highs of the mid-20s for Northern Ireland, central Scotland, but close towards 30 degrees Celsius in some southeastern areas. So really quite hot, and do remember that UV levels will be very high. There will be some late evening sunshine as well as the cloud continues to break up and generally staying dry for the vast majority of us overnight with some clear intervals. It is, though, with those southerly winds, going to be another humid and muggy night for the vast majority of us. Again, towns and cities holding up around 17, maybe 18 degrees Celsius in a few spots as well. So it could be quite uncomfortable for sleeping tonight. And then first thing into Sunday, it's watching this feature as it pushes into parts of Northern Ireland, could provide some very heavy rainfall and then push into northwest Scotland, and then later on we'll be migrating towards England, Wales, with some thunderstorms developing ahead of that across parts of Yorkshire down into Lincolnshire. Torrential downpours are possible with some surface water and localised flooding issues. Temperatures again on the hot side, climbing towards 31 degrees Celsius in the south, but further towards the west we are starting to feed in some slightly fresher air, and that's the theme as we head into the new working week. Generally those temperatures turning less hot than we have seen them, but rather unsettled. Bye-bye.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 24th of June. Today...
Happy Armed Forces Day. Celebrations take place around the UK, paying tribute to the men and women serving our country.
Vladimir Putin has vowed to punish those involved in the Wagner rebellion in a televised address to his nation. The speech comes after a morning of skirmishes between the mercenary group and the Russian army. We'll be bringing you more on that.
And Guns N' Roses are set to headline the second full day of Glastonbury later today. We'll be live from the festival with all the latest.
And of course, as always, we'll be bringing you the latest weather.
It's a hot and humid weekend to come for many of us. Join me later for the full GB News weather forecast.
Well, very good morning, and it's lovely to see you, or it's lovely for us to be seen by you, here on Breakfast on GB News. I'm Anne Diamond.
Yeah, and I'm Martin Dorby, standing in for Stephen Dixon, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Cornwall is going to host the national celebrations for Armed Forces Day for the first time ever.
Yeah, a series of events will be held across the country, but the main displays centred around Falmouth.
Over 1,000 service personnel and bands will parade through the town centre in the largest and longest military parade ever held in the UK.
Yeah, onlookers will then be treated to another fly past from the Red Arrows, a parachute drop by the RAF and a music concert in the evening.
It's interesting because I clearly live under one of the flight paths for many air shows, and it's lovely on a summer weekend. You get a heck of a lot of aircraft flying over. You always get your own tiny little fly past. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody looks ahead to a day of military might and celebration.
They say the people of Cornwall will never have seen anything like this. Marching bands, military inspections, flypasts, the might of the British Armed Forces on full display. 100,000 people are expected to descend on Falmouth today. The aim? To show support for the men and women who make up the armed forces, from currently serving troops to service families, veterans and cadets. There's a military parade at 11 o'clock. Over 1,000 service personnel, marching bands galore. Then in the afternoon, all eyes turn to the sky. Red Arrows, Navy Merlin helicopters, Spitfires, and wrapping up with a prom-style concert in the evening. It's the 15th Armed Forces Day. Cornwall Council says it's honoured to have won the bid to host this year's festivities. It's costing Cornish taxpayers £350,000, some saying it's inappropriate given the cost of living crisis, biting particularly hard in the Duchy. But it's expected to bring in around £7 million in revenue. Organisers say the event will be a chance to take photos, to make memories, and above all, to celebrate peace. A peace that's been hard fought for, hard won. A peace that's lasted 80 years. Jeff Moody, GB News.
And I'm sure there'll be blue skies over Cornwall this afternoon. Be lovely. Scott has got in touch. Thanks, Scott. My nan is turning 97 this year.
Yeah.
Whenever we ask what she did in the war, she always says she'd have to kill us. Turns out she helped track enemy planes in World War II. She married a Dutch airman who sadly died in the war. And my great-grandfather was one of the first in the RAF. See, there's a family that's really proud of their military background.
Yeah, and I've been, both been struck, Anne, today by just the sheer amount of outpouring of respect and love for the armed services from GB News viewers. Here's one here. Jacqueline, we're holding Armed Force celebrations today in sunny Bridlington, and we're loving the show. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Excellent. Andy says, I joined at 16 into the Royal Engineers, and I served 23 years and 341 days. I wouldn't change a thing. It's fantastic that the country celebrates Armed Forces Day, but the government has been systematically cutting back on defence. And the covenant we talked about earlier sounds great on the surface, but sometimes it's only paid lip service to when it matters.
Yeah, and Gareth sums up, I think, the thoughts of many viewers, and certainly my own opinion. Just like to thank all of our armed services for their service in keeping us all safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, joining us on this Armed Service Day morning is veteran and secondary head of year, Liam Gotella. Hello, it's lovely to see you.
Oh, good morning, both. How are you?
Yeah, well, we're very well, and we're very happy to be talking about something that is, frankly, so positive today. We are able to honour our armed forces. What are you going to actually be doing today?
So today I'm going to be volunteering in my local Royal British Legion establishment, where I'm going to be speaking to members of the public and promoting Armed Forces Day, and also promoting the Invictus Games, which is coming up in September.
You joined up at 16, didn't you? Yeah.
I did. I joined up, yeah, straight from school. I joined up, and it was probably one of the best choices I've ever made, and I don't regret a single minute of it.
Yeah, you know, so many people have been echoing that sentiment today, Liam, because we had a conversation about the government's looking to change the age to 18, but so many people have been in touch saying 16 is a perfect age, the making of the men, the making of the women. A lot of people contacting us saying they may have been homeless or in prison, come from damaged families. So how important is that comradeship and the ability for youngsters to get involved in the armed forces?
I think it's about you need to make the right decision. If you want to go into the forces, you need to make that decision if you want to go for it. But when I was younger, I wasn't very confident, didn't have much self-esteem. Communication wasn't one of my best skills. But when I joined the army at 16, that really helped me with my communication and helped with everyday life skills, really, which make it a lot better and makes it good for moving forward for obviously anyone who wants to join the forces.
Now, sadly, you were badly injured and came out of the service. You mentioned the Invictus Games a few moments ago, and I know that your son is the one who actually encouraged you to get involved in that. What's that been like for you?
So the Invictus Games, it's an event where you have around 500 competitors from 22 nations around the world, and we get together, which is going to be held in Germany this year in Dusseldorf, where we compete in a range of adaptive sports. Now, I was watching it last year. I was watching my best friend competing, and it was my young son said to me, well, why don't you do that, Dad? And my answer to him was just naturally, oh, Dad's too old, I can't do that anymore. And it was his answer, his reply to me was why not, Dad, why can't you? And just hearing my son say that was the thing that I needed, the drive that I had to push forward and give this a go.
So how did you even get going with it? Did you know what sort of disciplines you wanted to take part in? How did you get the coaching necessary?
Well, I think with the Invictus Games, it's about pushing yourself and trying things and trying to come out your comfort zone slightly. So the events that I'm taking part in is shot put, discus, wheelchair rugby, and indoor rowing. Now, I left school over 20 years ago, and I haven't touched a shot put or discus since. And I think it's just about trying new things and encouraging people just to try something new and having the confidence to give something go. And the coaching that we've received from the British Legion and the recovery team and all the coaches involved has been absolutely top class. Because we get the best coaches they're really patient, because like me, I haven't done that event for so many years, and they break it down and they have the patience to teach us and to give it a good go and represent our country and our families.
Liam, when you look back on your own active service and those of your friends and colleagues, how do you sum up the importance of the armed forces to your life and to our country?
I think everyone's got their own personal views on this one. I think being in the armed forces has got me to where I am today in my job and the way I am as a person. Because like I said, when I was in school, I wasn't the most confident person, and I think being in the forces, it gives you a good bit of belonging, and gives you the confidence to follow your dreams and to push yourself and to not give up. Because when I left the forces, I had a lot of knockbacks because I was in the forces since when I was 16. So to get a lot of rejections when I come out looking for jobs, I think being in the forces, it just gives you the don't give up attitude, and just keep pushing yourself and proving people wrong on the way, and proving to yourself that you can do it and you can make a difference.
Yeah, well, you're just about to prove it again at Invictus, aren't you? I tell you what, a lot of people have their own views on Prince Harry at the moment, but I think everybody is united in thinking what a wonderful games he started. Would you agree? What do you think of him?
I think with Prince Harry, he's the one who spearheaded the Invictus Games, and he's given me the opportunity to make my family proud. He's given me the opportunity to travel to Germany to compete in the games, and the most important thing is for me, my family to see me doing it, so my young children to see dad doing these type of events. So for what he's done for the games and for veterans, I can only say thank you.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to put it. He has enabled me to make my family proud. Of course they are, but that's brilliant. That's lovely.
Yeah, Liam, it's a tremendously moving day for everyone watching with connections to the armed forces. Thank you very much for joining us today. And once again, not for the first time in this show, I've got something in my eye.
Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
Give our love to your family.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you too. Lovely to see you. Yeah, that was really nice. I think that was an amazing guy.
Bounce back, magnanimous in his praise for Harry, despite all the paper talk.
Yeah, but the Invictus Games you can't take away from Harry.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing he started there.
And how lovely as well.
He was the right person to do it too, wasn't he?
And how lovely as well that his son motivated him, because I know a lot of veterans and I can fall on difficult times. To get that remotivation, to pick yourself up, dust yourself down, get going again. Absolute credit.
Yeah. I tell you what, it's strange on a day when we're thinking of our armed forces, that things are moving on in Russia at the moment. Very interesting to watch, if you know what to watch out for, but we've got an expert to talk to, because Vladimir Putin has vowed to punish those involved in the Wagner rebellion in a televised address to the nation.
Yeah, the speech comes after a morning of skirmishes between the Russian army and the previously loyal mercenary group, which is led by Prigozhin.
Well, let's find out more about this story, because I think it will come as a surprise to a lot of people what's been going on in Russia. Let's talk to Robert Fox, defence editor at the Evening Standard, and again, a friend of the programme. Hello there, Robert. It's good to talk to you. Hello. Can you explain to us, for those of us who haven't been following everything about the Wagner rebellion, what's been going on?
Well, Wagner is a private military company. It's a private army, but working to the Russian state. And they've done a lot of the fighting in Ukraine. It's been going for quite some time, particularly in Africa, by the way. But they have taken a disproportionate amount of casualties. This is the point that you have to realise about what's going on now, is that in the heavy fighting round Bakhmut, it was the Wagner soldiers, and a lot of them were pretty raw. They'd come out of prisons, they had been convicts, and they have taken a lot of the casualties, and they complained of being deprived of ammunition and full support from the Russian army. Now, we've got to a stage where the man in charge, who was a great pal of Putin on his rise to power to the presidency, a man called Yevgeny Prigozhin, as you rightly say, he's had enough. He's had enough of the way the Russians are running this war in Ukraine. He's pulled his troops back, and they've gone back into Russia to two crucial places, Rostov-on-Don, from which they mount a lot of the operation in Ukraine, and now in Voronezh. And there we have seen pictures already of Prigozhin sitting down with the local commanders and saying enough is enough. And the local commanders seem to be having an open dialogue with them.
What's going to happen next? I mean, it sounds highly dangerous.
Well, Vladimir Putin, in his speech, has mentioned the M word, mutiny, which is very serious indeed. And he has always said the Ukraine war, or the special military operation, has been a problem because Russia is being attacked by NATO and its allies, including the UK and the US. Now he's saying Russian forces are being attacked by Russian forces. And this is a huge problem, because this could be the inklings, the beginnings, small details of certainly tensions, possibly local civil wars. By the way, the kinds of things that dictators like Putin, and as one is one allowed to use the expression with G, fear the most. They fear spontaneous uprisings, and I think that this is what we're facing now. And for the moment, the Russians are pretty stuck as to how to deal with it. They think they can deal with it because there are only about 30,000 Wagnerites involved. But what do they use to put them down? Now, I've been getting telegram feeds overnight that the people that they would call out, the security police, the FSB and the GRU locally around Rostov and Voronezh, have been called out. But it's a Friday night. It's been a Friday night. And what happens on Friday night? Most of these that have been turning up, according to my informants, and they are biased, I do agree, they've either been drunk or suffering from massive hangovers. So Putin has got a morale problem and a discipline problem on his hands. And that's why the MOD, the British MOD, just put out a comment from their defence intelligence. This is the most important challenge to Putin's power since he rose to power at the beginning of this century, 2002.
Putin is not a man renowned for his compassion when it comes to dealing with his opponents. He puts journalists in jail, even pop stars like Pussy Riot in jail. These people are going to get pretty swift retribution. If he's using words like mutiny, it sounds to me like this is heading for a major confrontation.
Look, yes, but he's a winner. And Putin has got to be sure that he's going to win. How much has he and his commanders had to rely on Wagner in Russia, in Ukraine, particularly since last summer? And the answer is a lot. And how unique is Prigozhin? Not unique. There are other militias, there are other warlords, there are people like Kadyrov from the Chechens. Now, they will all be taking their cue. They're going to watch what is happening to Prigozhin. As one of the commentators, I think Mr. McFall, the former US ambassador, now a professor, the US ambassador to Russia, put it couldn't have come at a better time for the Ukrainians, who are under pressure with their counteroffensive, having a great deal of difficulty, as Zelensky has admitted, because of the battle for the close air, as it were, attack helicopters and so on, and the fact that they're trying to move tanks relatively underprotected over open ground. That has been an acute problem for the Ukrainians. All this, on the other side, could not have come at a better time. But it's related to other things. We've got to start joining the dots to really get the big picture. And I think the attack on the bridges to Crimea is a significant part in this tension of things snapping at the end of the week with the Wagner mercenaries.
And as you say, if it in a way is good news for Ukraine, at least in the short term, how dangerous is a very angry Putin who's concerned about sort of little civil wars going on?
Well, although, and we have discussed this, all of us, on GB News and elsewhere, the state of mind of Vladimir Putin. And I have to say, in a sort of coldly cynical way, on the whole, he's been quite sane. You can, in Putin land, if you can get the logic of Putin land, but the Great Russia and so on, and little nations are not really nations at all, like Ukraine, not that it is a little nation, all that is understandable. Now your question, what happens when that flips? When he is absolutely desperate, when he does see that he's under pressure? Yes, military vehicles and so on have been on the streets in Moscow overnight. Is that gesture? Or does he sense a real element of personal threat to him in this? Open question. It's a question to be resolved in the next 48 hours. And he could go bonkers. By the way, I still think the nuclear threat is bluff, because if he uses those weapons that he's moved into Belarus, it's toast for a lot of people, I'm sorry to say, but it's certainly toast for Vladimir Putin.
But you think we'll know, you think something will happen in the next 24 hours?
24 to 48 hours. If you think what happened at the end of communism in 1990-91 and the coup, and then it failed against Gorbachev, which brought Yeltsin to power. Remember, standing on top of his tank, and really a very important moment in world history as well as Russian history. I don't like say never, and journalists make lousy profits, by the way. We have no more control and understanding of the future than anybody. I'd prefer my friend Darren, the big issue seller, to really inform you on this, because he knows what's going on in the street. But I would guess, yes, it's when you feel momentum is happening, and this is 56 years in journalism. Momentum doesn't go in a line. I mean, from anything we were commemorating Armed Forces Day, and I remember in the Falklands when the surrenders came. They didn't come in a logical sequence. They suddenly break. Think water rather than bricks and mortar. And I think that this is what's flowing around, swirling around. And you must look at those borderlands between Ukraine and Russia. Crimea, Belgorod, Rostov-on-Don, which is the logistical base. It's the base for supply, and Voronezh. And above all, what Prigozhin has done, he said, Mr. President, and they've not named each other in this, you've got a situation on your hands.
Before we let you go, Robert, obviously we all remember your part in the Falklands War, one of the best and thus the most famous journalists engaged in that. What are your thoughts on this Armed Forces Day?
I have a simple thought for you now. I was listening to our colleague, the veteran from Invictus. Actually, I have a message for the government, and it's absolutely crude, and it's a message for any government. You've got to pay your soldiers more. You've got to pay everybody at the bottom end in public service. You've got to reward them to make them feel that what they do, whether it's a policeman, whether you're looking at pollution in rivers and seas or fighting for king and country, that your job is worth it. And, Andrew, it's well worth asking those guys who paraded brilliantly at Trooping the Colour a week ago. Ask what they took home a month. And you'll be quite surprised.
Yes, that is sombre, but I think people are probably agreeing with you up and down the country. Thank you so much for your thoughts, because they're always worth having.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's absolutely fascinating. I could listen to that guy talk all day long.
Pay your forces well.
Yeah, I think everyone out there watching this show today would agree with that.
Do stay with us. We've got lots more to come, including a look, of course, at the latest sports news. Stay with us. It's Breakfast on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back. It's 9:25. We were just thinking, what do you think about it in this last half hour of the programme? And I was thinking of going home and having a big drink. But of course it would be of water.
Of course it would.
We know how important it is to keep hydrated. Pamela says, hi Pamela, she says, this is how I keep hydrated in Spain. It was 35 degrees yesterday. Lemon slices in a litre of water and then you drink it over the day. Plus other drinks like tea or G&T.
Yeah, we found out earlier, of course, Anne, that 21 million pints extra of beer have been swigged by Brits, but that doesn't apparently count in your 6 cups of water a day, which is more the pity, because I'm going to see my dad in Nottingham tonight and we'll be having a few cups of water.
Yeah, you're contributing to the economy.
Yes. And here's a great one from Susan, who says, I live in Wales near the racecourse. It was raining yesterday and it's raining now. It's not sunny everywhere. Stop rubbing it in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Louise says, as a postwoman, I've had to walk for 4 to 5 hours in intense heat. Posties have no option to stay out of the heat because Royal Mail don't allow us to start work earlier or finish earlier in the heat. It's brutal when the temperature is above 25 or so.
Yeah, and Francis makes an excellent point. Please, can somebody remind people when they're walking their dogs to check how hot the pavement is by putting down your own barefoot
very good point.
on the ground. If it burns your feet, then it's too hot for your dog's paws. Think about the poor pooch.
Yeah, and Terry says, I've got no problem, because I was worried a bit earlier. We were going a bit nanny state-ish on you and telling you to remember to drink water today. I've no problem being reminded about how to keep safe in hot weather. Every day, A&E units throughout the country are full of people who, for whatever reason, get themselves into situations because they don't follow that sort of advice. No common sense, she says.
Yeah, maybe they're having some of the 21 million pints of beer and forgetting to put the suntan lotion on. Take care.
We're talking sport at the moment, and I guess if you're playing sport out and about today, you'll get hot. Well, in certain places you will. Aidan McGee's with us. Hi.
Good morning to you both.
How are you doing, mate? Right, you got some boxing news. AJ back in the ring.
That's right. Yeah. So he, I wouldn't say he's been inactive. He did have a fight in February, didn't he, against Jermaine Franklin? But they're not really top-level fights.
No.
There was a proposal put to his long-time rival Dillian Whyte yesterday from the promoter Eddie Hearn. It wasn't really agreeable initially when it was first put to them a couple of weeks ago to fight Anthony Joshua at the O2 on August the 12th. But apparently now he's gone back to... He's changed his mind, and he says he is agreeable to him, and he thinks he will fight Anthony Joshua at the O2 on August the 12th. Now, the interesting thing here is that they've got long-standing rivalry, as I mentioned. Dillian Whyte beat AJ back in the amateur days. Anthony Joshua then took revenge in 2015. I was at the fight at the O2, and he beat Dillian Whyte within 7 rounds. Dillian Whyte is a different animal since then. He's improved vastly. He's been in the ring with Tyson Fury, among other ones, and he's a much more caliber fighter. He's in better shape, and he has a bit between his teeth. Whereas I think a lot of people look at Anthony Joshua and think, does he really want to be there anymore? Has he earned too much money? Has he really got the ambition? He's worth about £300 million.
Yeah.
Has he got the eye of the tiger, to coin that boxing phrase?
I was about to say that. One of them looks like he's training in the mountains, and one of them looks like he's doing a bit too much kind of PlayStation.
Yeah, quite possibly. For the loser here, for whoever gets defeated, and of course it could end up in a draw, we have to consider that as well. But for the defeated fighter here, I'm not sure where they really go. I'm not sure if AJ can take another defeat on his CV. But it's a decent challenge. And I think there's a paucity of decent boxing bouts at the moment. We mentioned with Anne yesterday, didn't we, about how these celebrity fights are gaining prominence now, because we're not seeing the fights we want at boxing level. When Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are threatening to get in the ring and have some MMA, it's because...
Has there been any movement on that?
No, it's still no movement, but it's still... No, I think it will happen, I think it will happen. I do. Obviously the two guys aren't doing it for money, but I think that the traction it's gained online on social media...
if they did it for charity.
Without doubt, yeah. I think that's a possibility, and I think it will happen,
I'd like to see it. City season, transfer window, the big checkbooks are coming out. What's the movement?
Well, I think Ruben Neves is one we need to look at. It's been confirmed yesterday, £47 million going from Wolves to the Saudi Arabia side, Al Hilal. Now, this is really, really important because this guy's 26 years old. He turned down Barcelona, apparently. We all thought he was going to go there. He's an outstanding player, and he's a Portuguese player. He's at the prime of his career, and he's gone to Saudi, where the league... I don't know what we know so little about it that we don't actually know what sort of standard it is. But that tells you it's different when a player goes there for a last payday. That's understandable because there are huge sums of money on offer there.
But is he too young for that?
Well, I just think he's in his peak. This is 26 usually is your big contract. And okay, you can argue maybe go there for 2 years, make a stack of cash and come back. But I wonder whether with Saudi having come for the golf. Qatar came for the World Cup. Abu Dhabi came for Manchester City back in 2008. Are Saudi now just coming for football? And you know what? People can whinge in this country, but this is exactly what the Premier League did 30 years ago, and nobody moaned. They swallowed up Italy, Germany, lots of other leagues around there, and brought the best players to England. And maybe Saudi just turned the tables. It gives rise to the accusation of sports washing. So I was talking to someone recently, and they said sports washing. Well, the Sheikhs were involved in horse racing back in the 70s, and there were controversial fights in different areas of the world as well. So it's not a new thing. Maybe they just do it. Maybe it's just extravagance.
You know as well as I do, though, Aidan, that football fans have a real problem with this kind of thing until the precise moment they buy their club. And they're like, oh yeah, great, we'll have all the money and all the big checkbooks. So that ship has sailed, hasn't it?
Yeah, kind of. And also, does sport washing actually work? Did Qatar hosting the World Cup, did it actually improve the image of Qatar, or did it just shine a light to make people think, oh, actually, I didn't know there were all these human rights abuses, and they go away with a negative view of Qatar? So I'm not sure if the long-term strategy actually works. Maybe it's just extravagance. They've got a lot of money. They want to spend it on sport.
Both ways, can't they? They can indulge in what you call sports washing to try and improve their image, but actually you have an effect. All those people going from all over the world into Qatar must have had an effect on Qatar.
Yes, it did. It did, and I think most people came away with a positive experience. I mean, there weren't as many fans there as there would normally be. But I mean, it seems astonishing 6 months on that it even happened, in the middle of the season, because we saw all the backup of the fixtures as well, and all the wear and tear it had on the players' bodies. But yeah, I mean, We'll know in probably a year or two's time when people look back on that World Cup. But the fact that football was so good, I think people will look at it will be a rose-tinted spectacle effect. I think people will look back on it and think that it was actually quite good.
It started as a PR disaster for Qatar, but in the end, the football was so good. People, again, the morals get pushed aside.
And maybe Saudi's interest in stepping things up from there is just a continuation of that. But we'll see. OK, quick look ahead to the Ashes. Second test starts next week. Next Wednesday, that's going to be down in London at Lords. The first one was at Edgbaston, a fantastic series. So it got us off to a brilliant start. Moeen Ali was quite influential with his bowling, but he's got a dodgy finger. He's got a finger injury last week, so the Leicestershire leg spinner Rehan Ahmed has been brought in. 18 years old, made his Test debut against Pakistan last winter. But that's a big sort of Michael Owen effect for him. It's a big step up for him at the age of 18. A lot of pressure on his shoulders. Yeah. But we're lining up for a brilliant second test. England not out of it. They're playing the mind games already. They believe that they should have won that first test, and it's just an aberration. Australia got it, of course. But the opponents are allowed to be good. This is the thing. England were outstanding in that first test, but you can't discount the Australians. In a word, did England declare too early in the first test? I think they did, yes. So do I. That was more than one word. Yep. Aidan McGee, always a pleasure. Never a chore. Thank you very much.
And we've got much more to come, so stick with us. We'll be heading off to Glastonbury in a few short moments. Stay with us. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of women. Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast with Anne and Martin.
Yes, now, of course, Glastonbury continues into its second full day now of music, headlined later on this evening by Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, I saw them when I was a bit of a snip of a lad. Fantastic. Let's cross over now to our showbiz reporter, Stephanie Tetchy, who is at the festival. Steph, what can we get excited about today? And more to the point, is anybody up yet, apart from you?
Yeah, things are starting to get a bit now busy on camp. People are up, most of them have sore heads, and it seems like there's always this long queue for the showers. So I tend to beat the crowd by getting up at like 5 a.m, having the showers to myself, having the whole campsite. But right now it is very busy, and it is the second day of music, as you guys have mentioned, and it's all about Guns N' Roses tonight. They've never performed at Glastonbury before, so they are landing with a bang because they will be performing on the Pyramid stage. And we're expected to hear 30 of their greatest tracks. So I can imagine later on it's going to be a big sing-along on Worthy Farm. But we have other Glasto virgins, including Rick Astley, who will be performing on the Pyramid today. He'll be the first performer at 12 o'clock, which will be quite exciting for people who are fans of Rick Astley. But then we've got other people such as Lizzo and the Manic Street Preachers. And that's a good thing about Glastonbury. There is music for everybody, no matter what genre you're into.
Yeah, I mean, the weather couldn't be better, really, at the moment, because at least you're not surrounded with mud, and as has happened before. But when those big performers are performing on the Pyramid stage, which is the big one, how close can you get? How much queuing do you have to do to get anywhere near a decent sort of space?
Well, I know some die-hard fans, like, for instance, Guns N' Roses fans. I've spoken to some. They've already started queuing, so they will spend the whole day front row at the Pyramid. So by later on, when it's about 10 o'clock, when they do come on stage, they've got the front row seat. So people always start queuing from early morning, and they just stay at the Pyramid the whole day, because you've got about 200,000 people, even though, you know, different people go to different sets. When it's a headlining sets, you're thinking about at least 150,000 people all in the field. So if you want to get that prime spot, you have to go there really early.
You know, it's funny, a lot of people spend so long, how British, to spend your entire day queuing to see a band. I went to Glastonbury when I was younger, I never saw a single band. I spent all my time in the dance tent and in the beer tent. There's loads more to do on site, apart from just the acts on there. Tell us about the sort of sights and sounds that you see walking around, and no doubt the smells when you're walking around Glastonbury.
The thing about Glasto, there is everything for everyone. Beyond the music, as you were saying, Martin, we've got a lot of arts installations. Like, you can spend time just walking around from sculpture to sculpture and seeing different things. You've got poetry workshops. In the morning, the people who haven't got the sore heads, people do yoga in the morning, Pilates, dance classes. There's actually a cinema on site as well, where people get to watch films. So if you're not really into the music, there's so much culture and so much inspiration when you're walking through Worthy Farm. And let's talk about the food. Almost every single culinary delight you can think of is available. Obviously, you've got your British staples, but then you've got food from Thailand, Caribbean food. So you end up eating a lot at Glastonbury.
Yeah, and how expensive is the food?
You're looking to spend around about £13 minimum for like a starter, a main, and then a drink as well. It is quite costly, you know, it all adds up. But, you know, all these different food vans, they prepare their food with love. Most of them are quite sustainable as well, which is quite good. So I think people are always happy to spend money on food to kind of keep them going in the heat.
Yeah, it's funny, Jeremy Corbyn had a standing ovation, of course, a few years ago, that Jeremy Corbyn song. They were due to show a film this time, weren't they, about Corbyn, but they pulled it because there were complaints about his politics and anti-Semitism. So Glastonbury's always had this allegiance with politics, hasn't it? Is that happening this year, or is it just back to basics, let's focus on the music?
I think it has been back to basics on focusing in the music, but obviously this film based on Jeremy Corbyn, The Big Lie, it was surrounding his political career and how it came to an end due to accusations of anti-Semitism. That was set to be screened today, but organisers were forced to pull it after a high-profile Jewish organisation said it will be quite sinister for them to screen the documentary. But, you know, Martin and Anne, actually some cheeky people brought the documentary on USB, and it was actually shown at a speakers forum last night. So people were quite determined to see this documentary, and I think that is just the rebellious nature of Glastonbury. Whereas politics and music meets, people are always going to try and make it happen. But today we've got talks with people such as Ed Miliband, who will be talking about the climate crisis. So as usual, politics and Glastonbury go hand in hand.
Yes, you can be as political as you want, I guess. And as you said, I mean, sometimes you just go to Glastonbury and you don't actually go to any of the concerts. You can, I suppose the atmosphere is always there, but you can spend the whole day. It's like a small town, isn't it? I would probably spend most of the days, the first 2 days, just looking around and enjoying the atmosphere. But so many people might do the same thing, but what they really want to see is the big night, the Elton John, the huge headliner. And is that tomorrow?
That is tomorrow night. Elton John will be closing Glastonbury, and there is that feeling, there is that community feeling here. But when you speak to most festival goers here, they're just excited about seeing Elton, and it's definitely going to be one for Glasto's history books, because this is his last ever performance in the UK, and it feels really weird saying that because Elton John is such a staple. But I can't see a better fitting or tribute for Elton than to close his career on the Pyramid stage.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything worse than listening to Ed Miliband at a music festival. I mean, I just don't think that's the sort of reason I go. I mean, you know, he's into sustainable energy, plenty of hot air coming out of him. Something else that's quite political is happening on the stage tonight, Steph. A load of NHS employees are being brought out to underline the social responsibility of the festival. How does being socially responsible fit with sitting in a field and basically getting off your head?
Well, yeah, those two do not go hand in hand, Martin. But every year, Glastonbury tries to aim to raise £2 million for the NHS. They see it as a part of their social responsibility causes, which the festival likes to be known for. And next week, NHS will be celebrating its 75th anniversary. And as a tribute to them, later on, there will be a poet called Miles Chambers who will be performing a poem on stage, on the Pyramid stage, with other nurses, doctors, different faces from the NHS, which will be quite fitting to watch.
Oh, it will. It's all part of the whole shindig, isn't it? Have a wonderful day, and we'll join you tomorrow, I guess, won't we? We'll be looking forward to the big Elton John finale tomorrow. Thanks, Steph.
I always thought the journalists that cover Glastonbury have a real job on, because they've got to try and keep it together. They've got to file their copy. They've got to be on.
Not enjoy themselves too much.
Yeah, they have to kind of skirt around the edges.
But I think she's very wise. I mean, I've always been pretty good at getting up in the morning.
Yeah.
If you can get ahead of the others to the showers, to me that would be really important, good way to start the day.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to one of the things that's been on everybody's minds, I guess, and that's the mortgage crisis, cost of living crisis. And, of course, there were meetings in 10 Downing Street to try and address this.
Yeah, because banks have pledged more protection for homeowners as mortgage rates soar after the Bank of England increased interest rates to 5%.
Yes, in fact, they say they're going to offer more flexibility, allowing borrowers a temporary change to their mortgage terms for up to 6 months if they're struggling to afford the new rates.
Well, following yesterday's meeting with the UK's leading banks, Jeremy Hunt stressed that the 6-month flexibility on switching terms would not affect credit scores as it may done previously.
But I guess we're all asking, is it enough? Or could the government be doing more to help anyone struggling? Earlier on, we spoke to the political commentator for Young Voices, Ben Cope, who said while some might be relieved with the support, it could actually lead to further struggles.
Scheme is voluntary at the moment. Barclays and I believe HSB have signed up for this, and obviously there'll be pressure on others to follow suit. But it is a pretty good thing though, Ryan. If you're on a chunky repayment mortgage, a couple of grand a month, go to interest only, no penalty, no credit rating affected, you could be saving £1,000 or more. So that's a good thing. But I have a caveat. Are people saving that money going to splurge it on other things and drive inflation up anyway?
Well, that is exactly the question that Jeremy Hunt would have been asking himself as he weighed up how this scheme should work over the last few days, because they're very aware that as interest rates have risen and risen, as you said, the Bank of England raising interest rates by 0.5 percentage points this week, taking them to 5%, increasing mortgage rates to unaffordable levels for many people. They really feel a need to intervene to do something as mortgage repayments just get higher and higher and higher. But at the same time, the reason why the Bank of England are increasing rates as they have been is obviously to curb inflation, to make debt more expensive, to try and suck some money out of the economy. So yes, this is an inflationary measure in inflationary times by Jeremy Hunt. And while mortgage holders will be no doubt relieved that they are going to be receiving some options of support, a lot of other people in the economy, no least renters, will be frustrated that that they're not receiving any support, and this will just prolong the cost of living crisis for them.
Well, they are in a way, I suppose, because everything has a knock-on effect, doesn't it? And there are many buy-to-let, and people renting are paying landlords, aren't they? And if those landlords get into trouble because they can't afford their mortgage payments anymore, then the rent goes up. So everything has a knock-on effect, I guess. I don't know what you hear from other people in Young Voices, but there's a report in today's Times saying a quarter of middle-class parents are stepping in to help their children cover the cost of their mortgages already. Some are making sacrifices to their own retirement plans or selling spare assets, such as a second car, to ensure that their children can continue living in the homes they've just bought with a mortgage they can no longer afford. Do you hear that at all?
You hear a lot of it, and you also hear a lot of parents where they can trying to help their children get on the housing ladder, whether that's through the initial deposit or some early repayments. These are, as we've said, really difficult times for mortgage affordability, particularly for young people who essentially don't have as much savings to fall back on. So yes, there's definitely a bit of a sort of voluntary generational wealth transfer here, with parents feeling the need to step in and help their children during this really difficult mortgage crisis.
And it is a mortgage crisis. Earlier on, we weren't only talking about younger people worried about their mortgage going to the bank of mum and dad, but also maybe one way is to, not particularly maybe for young people, I don't know, is to take in lodgers. Yeah,
there's been a boom in that apparently, and you can, I didn't know, but you get £7,500 tax relief, tax-free money if you take in a lodger under government rules. So that's something that maybe people should consider if you want to get a few extra quid on the side.
And thinking of supermarket prices as well, Lucy says, prices at supermarkets have risen faster than necessary. They have been inflating prices for profit. Ask the public. We've known about this for months. Doubling prices. Aldi has the prices right. Fuel is another profiteering ploy. At least the government have highlighted it, even though they are from another planet.
Yeah, and on mortgages, Barry is a cynical take here. Jeremy Hunt has done nothing to help. Lenders will just look at means testing and will only help lenders to find out which customers they can lose long term.
But didn't you say one of the parts of the agreement that they've hoped to have come to is that the lending companies won't means test you?
Correct. So if anybody's
won't be allowed to.
That's absolutely correct. So if anybody's worried out there about changing your deal, but you don't want your bank nosing around in your financial status, perhaps you've changed job, or you're not in a better position as you was before, don't worry. They're not going to do that. So you can make that call with confidence, save yourself a few quid.
Do you believe that?
I do. I think they can't announce something like that and then do a U-turn, because people would never ever forgive them.
What? Can't they?
God, I'm being a bit too
These
forgiving.
are banks we're talking
about. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, that's what I worry. I worry that they're promising something now to the government, to Jeremy Hunt, because he was kind enough to ask them for a coffee at number 10. And I just worry that a bit further down the line they'll say it was unworkable, we couldn't quite do it.
And it's a voluntary scheme as well. They don't even have to do it.
That's your get out if it's voluntary.
Yeah.
Surely.
Let's hope they do.
Yeah. We've had lots more calls about joining the armed forces, it being Armed Forces Day. We'll bring you up to date on those in a couple of moments. But I tell you what, if you are heading out at the moment to an event somewhere, it's going to be hot. So remember to stay hydrated. This is where I'm giving you advice that you probably don't need. But our GBNews reporter, Jack Carson, is out in the heat for us today in Cannon Hill Park in Birmingham. Is it heating up nicely for you there, Jack?
it's going in the opposite direction, and in the last half an hour all I've got at the minute is cloud. But hopefully, I've jinxed it. I put my short sleeves up thinking it was lovely and hot. I put the SPF 30 on. I was getting ready for some sun, maybe a bit of a tan, but right now it's gone the other way. But hopefully elsewhere in the country you are going to get some heat today. Around London in the southeast we're expecting temperatures upwards of 33 degrees Celsius today. But what we've got and what the Met Office are warning about is a big stark in the weather across the country, because in the southeast, even in the Midlands here, although it doesn't look like it in the minute in the West Midlands, there is going to be some sun, high 20s, but in the north, parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and the northwest as well, the Met Office warning around thunderstorms. The chief meteorologist Matthew Lenhart saying that there are going to be impactful thunderstorms affecting the northern half of the UK. There is a chance of heavy rain, hail, lightning and gusty winds as well. I've got a feeling that we might get some thunderstorms here in Birmingham, because you know, it starts to feel really muggy and you start to feel maybe drips of rain. But I'm hoping, because I haven't brought a coat, so I'm hoping that holds off for a bit. But of course, if you are out in the sun, it is of course important to keep hydrated, as you were mentioning, and also wear that sun cream as well. Melanoma is the 5th most common cancer in the UK, and that increases your chances of getting that if you do have sunburn. So it is important to stay cool and not spend too much in direct sunlight as well. And of course, when we get to these warmer climates, we do also get, of course, warmer evenings as well. The temperature doesn't necessarily drop, but how to keep yourself a little bit cooler in the evenings. Apparently, one advice is to take a warm bath before bed, because apparently it dilates the blood vessels. So when you get out the bath and you are cooling down, you cool down quicker. So maybe that's one bit of advice if you are out in the sun today.
Well, absolutely, and lots of people will be today, it being Armed Forces Day. Jack, thanks very much indeed. Yes, don't forget it is Armed Forces Day, and if you can't get out and about to one of these big events, we're covering it for you live here on GB News. We'll be live from Falmouth, which is the big sort of headquarters for it today. Do stay tuned to GB News then, that's the way to watch it. And stay tuned anyway, because Esther and Phil are up next. Here's the weather.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It is set to be quite a humid weekend for all of us as we feed in some very mild, if not hot, air from the southwest. We do have high pressure in charge across southeastern areas, helping it to keep fairly dry and settled. But further towards the north and west, frontal features pushing their way through will bring outbreaks of rain to parts of Scotland, gradually moving up towards the Highlands and the Northern Isles as well. Elsewhere, some of the drizzle across parts of Cumbria into the Lake District will fizzle its way out. Whilst it has been quite a cloudy start for the vast majority, it will break up as we head into the afternoon, allowing for some brighter, sunnier spells to develop. In that sunshine, climbing to highs of the mid-20s for Northern Ireland, central Scotland, but close towards 30 degrees Celsius in some southeastern areas. So really quite hot, and do remember that UV levels will be very high. There will be some late evening sunshine as well as the cloud continues to break up, and generally staying dry for the vast majority of us overnight with some clear intervals. It is, though, with those southerly winds, going to be another humid and muggy night for the vast majority of us. Again, towns and cities holding up around 17, maybe 18 degrees Celsius in a few spots as well. So it could be quite uncomfortable for sleeping tonight. Then first thing into Sunday, it's watching this feature as it pushes into parts of Northern Ireland, could provide some very heavy rainfall, and then push into northwest Scotland, and then later on we'll be migrating towards England, Wales, with some thunderstorms developing ahead of that across parts of Yorkshire down into Lincolnshire. Torrential downpours are possible with some surface water and localised flooding issues. Temperatures again on the hot side, climbing towards 31 degrees Celsius in the south, but further towards the west we are starting to feed in some slightly fresher air, and that's the theme as we head into the new working week. Generally those temperatures turning less hot than we have seen them, but rather unsettled. Bye-bye.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how